Now, by the way, John, our analysts indicate it could go a heck of a lot higher than that.
Make some utterly bogus predictions that, as we'll see later, are actually very comparable to some of Elon Musk's.
Your profit on a mere $6,000 investment would be upwards of $60,000.
Jesus, that's my mortgage, man.
Exactly, you could pay off your mortgage.
And then basically tell people it's a solved problem. We know how to do this.
And in the case of Airtime, based on every technical factor out there, John, we are looking at a grand slam home run.
And for who do you trust? Hubba, hubba, hubba. Money, money, money. Who do you trust? Me? I'm giving away free money.
And of course, remember to thank your fans for how much they believe in your vision.
Hey, John, thank you for your vote of confidence, and welcome to the Investor Center. Bye-bye.
At 12, he built a video game he called Blastar, which started his lifelong love of inventing things that already exist.
Like most of Musk's stuff, it's just a new spin on a very old idea.
The other guys looked at me like I just discovered fire.
So maybe put $17 million into a pedestrian car make. Sure, it's a kind of a legit business, but you can't make any real money like that. Now you've got to lie your ass off, telling people how it's going to change everything. And eventually, you'll get your converts. And the value of the company starts to reflect the utterly delusional promises rather than reality. Then when the stocks are sky high, start selling your stock. You don't have to sell all of it, of course, but hey, if you can convince people it's worth 10 times what it's actually worth, you only have to sell 10% of your stock to make a profit. Musk did a little better than this. So let's just put that in an infographic column. Elon Musk put about $70 million into Tesla and has sold off $40 billion of Tesla stock. Now, sure, Tesla did actually become a real car company that made about 1% to 2% of the cars in America. But at its peak, it was worth more than all of the other car makers combined, which is, of course, when Musk started selling off his stock. Conveniently forgetting what he told his stockholders, that just as his money was the first in, it would be the last out. Something that has apparently rattled even committed Tesla fans.
Really infatuated with every aspect of it. So as soon as I got home, I thought to myself, if I enjoy the car this much, chances are everyone else will too. So I made an investment back when the stock was trading at now what would be $17 a share. I never really thought much of it, and I just thought it would be cool that if the price of the stock did well, maybe that would be enough to pay for the sales tax on the cars. In November of 2021, near the peak of the market, Elon Musk posted a poll on Twitter asking his followers if he should pay his fair share in taxes by selling 10% of his Tesla holdings. Personally, I felt like this was his way of being able to cash out of the stock during a time where it was trading at unrealistic expectations, and I have a feeling he knew this, and he used the audience to his advantage to pay taxes. In total, throughout the last year, he sold about $40 billion in value from the stock, while investors argue that he's taking money from Tesla to plug the losses of Twitter, which he had no reason buying in the first place. Although this is really only the tip of the iceberg, and the rest is something that not a lot of people are talking about.
Actually, some of us have been talking about that stuff for some time now. But Tesla, like any other company in a pump and dump, is actually a legit company. Its valuation is just off the charts crazy. But oddly, it losing some 70% of its value still doesn't put it on a realistic valuation. But what seems to be the origin of the latest crash, other than Musk's crazy antics on Twitter, taking one random example from the non-stop drama show that is Elon Musk running Twitter of, say, I don't know. Oh yeah, he said that he was going to ban anyone who linked to other sites, only to revoke the policy a day or so later. Yeah, the real-life Tony Stark, who's totally going to land on Mars by 2024.
You've slightly put back the expected date to put the first human on Mars till 2029, I want to say.
Yeah. But anyway, like I was saying, it looks like the latest reason for the crash in the Tesla stock price is it looks like the underlying car company has basically saturated demand, meaning there's no plausible route for growth of Tesla as a car company.
Further fueling concerns are customer wait times for Tesla cars, which dropped sharply over 2022. Some investors see this as a sign demand is already softening.
If Tesla produced more cars at this point, you simply drive down the price, which is why Tesla was offering in the last months of 2022 a $7,500 discount for cars purchased that year. And similar discounts in China, leading to riots for people who just paid full price. And those panicky price reductions have continued into 2023, with prices being reduced by $10,000+ in some cases, leading to some understandably hurt feelings from Tesla fans. Like when you realize that had you ordered the car 1 week later, you would have saved $10,000.
Yeah, France as well. It's really looking more or less like Europe-wide. So, and to your point, Matt, these are not just little trims. These are big reductions. We're talking about 20% for the Model Y, which is their top model.
Yeah, don't think making more cars when you can't sell the ones that you're currently making sounds like a very good business plan. But like I was saying, even having lost 70% of its market cap, Tesla is still probably massively overvalued. Give or take, the entire US auto industry, Tesla, is worth just under $1 trillion. In fact, it turns out that Tesla's depreciation is currently about the same size as all the other car manufacturers combined. That's how much Tesla's market cap has depreciated. So if you value Tesla like a regular car company, it makes about 1 to 2% of the cars in America, it's probably going to be valued somewhere around $10–20 billion, that sort of thing. So the stock that Elon Musk sold in Tesla was likely more than the entire actual value of the company. So break down like this. When Musk founded the company, he put about $17 million in for something like 15% of the company. Let's call it 10 to make our numbers easier. Tesla is currently worth something like $10–20 billion. If you value it as a car company, so let's call it 20 and say Elon Musk's realistic share of that is about $2 billion, which you could say is actually pretty good. That's like a 10 times return on investment over something like 10 years. Then you get on to the crux of it, which is when Elon Musk has now sold a fraction of those shares for $40 billion. And just so we're clear, this was Elon Musk cashing out of his own company. The one he tells everyone else is vital for the future of mankind to accelerate the transfer to electrical energy. And the fact that he's cashing out should tell you everything you need to know.
We haven't seen a reason yet that he's sold over $7 billion worth of stock over the last couple of weeks and months. So, that's on top of the $33 billion that he had done before.
Now, that money didn't just appear out of nowhere. Other people put money into Tesla based on Elon Musk's promises. And I should stress, this is something that Elizabeth Holmes didn't do. And she stressed that she didn't do it because it would show that the promises that you're making to her overvalue your company were being done for financial gain. But a simple reading of the situation is that's exactly what Elon Musk has done here. So why isn't Elon Musk in jail yet? The amount of ethically questionable wealth transfer here and the destruction of wealth we're looking at is truly eye-watering. Elizabeth Holmes lied to investors, and when those lies became apparent, the value of the company went from about $10 billion to zero. And she got prosecuted and sentenced to 10 years in jail for that. And her light sentence was in part due to she hadn't sold stock when it was massively overvalued based on her false promises. Trevor Milton likewise pumped up Nikola stock on fictitious revolutionary truck promises to the point where Nikola became the most valuable trucking company in America, even though they'd never actually made a truck. And then, of course, he sold loads of that stock, like a fraction of a billion, and the company
burn that ass.
billions in value. And because Milton took the money out when he knew that the company couldn't deliver on these promises, he's now been convicted of fraud. What Elon Musk has done is about 100 times worse than both of these companies put together. Over 2022, Tesla's market cap depreciated at the rate of about a Theranos per week. In the game of cashing out as most of you can from your overvalued company, Elon Musk literally sold more than 100 times more of his overvalued company than Trevor Milton and Elizabeth Holmes combined. And in terms of how much their company's lost, Musk is about 40 times worse than Theranos and Nikola combined. All of this was fueled by years of Elon Musk's utterly too good to be true promises. Like the robo-taxi, where there'll be 1 million of them on the road, guaranteed by 2020.
If you fast forward a year, maybe a year and 3 months, but next year for sure, we will have over 1 million robo-taxis on the road.
One costing some $30,000, $40,000, going down to $25,000 eventually.
So the current cost of a Model 3 robo-taxi is less than $38,000. We expect that number to improve over time.
Patent approval on the next generation of radar detectors that have both huge military and civilian applications. Now.
2 years from now, we make a car that has no steering wheels or pedals. And if we need to accelerate that time, we can always just delete parts. Easy.
By the way, John, our analysts indicate it could go a heck of a lot higher than that.
Yeah, probably, say long-term, 3 years, robo-taxis with eliminated parts, that maybe it ends up being $25,000 or less.
And they would return some $30,000 per year for 10 years.
You say, what would be the probable gross profit from a single robo-taxi? We think probably something on the order of $30,000 per year.
Returning $300,000 on a mere $30,000 investment.
So in nominal dollars, that would be, a little over $300,000 over the course of 11 years. Might be higher. I think these consumptions are actually relatively conservative.
What? Those are almost exactly Wolf of Wall Street con man type numbers.
Your profit on a mere $6,000 investment would be upwards of $60,000. Jeez, that's my mortgage, man. Exactly, you could pay off your mortgage.
I mean, the really fundamental message that consumers should be taking today.
I'm not coward. I'm not cheesing this. Oh shit.
Right now, John, the stock trades over the counter at 10 cents a share. And by the way, John, our analysts indicate it could go a heck of a lot higher than that.
It'll be like owning a horse in 3 years. I mean, fine if you don't own a horse, but you should go into it with that expectation.
Needless to say, none of this happened. Teslas didn't magically turn into money printers for their owners, and people who didn't buy Teslas didn't end up owning a horse, as we are here now 3 years later. In short, what Musk was promising was 100% pure, unadulterated aerotype. Those are numbers that make the most stupid Ponzi schemes seem plausible. I mean, in a normal inflation situation, 5% return on investment per year is pretty good. If you believe Musk's magical robo-taxis delivering 100% risk-free return on investment per year, it would have instantly made all other forms of investment redundant. Now, if you're thinking this doesn't rise to the level of Elizabeth Holmes-style fraud, let this sink in. Andrew Karpathy joined Tesla as head of their AI autopilot in 2017 and described its state at that time like this.
For example, this is what I've seen in roughly 5 years at Tesla. When I joined, it barely kept lane on the highway. I think going up from Palo Alto to SF was like 3 or 4 interventions. Anytime the road would do anything geometrically or turn too much, it would just not work.
In that exact same year, Elon Musk was claiming already that it was going to be able to drive across America without anyone touching the steering wheel.
Yeah, essentially November or December this year, we should be able to go from all the way from a parking lot in California to a parking lot in New York. No controls touched at any point during the entire journey. Amazing.
That's when you know you're dealing with a world-class con man, when he will say with absolute certainty a absolutely ludicrous claim that he absolutely knows is not true, and the audience fall for it hook, line, and sinker.
Maybe.
And at that point, Musk had already been claiming for over a year that it was 10 times safer than a human driver.
Like a Model S and Model X at this point can drive autonomously with greater safety than a person right now.
Yeah. Look me in the eye and tell me this doesn't stack up to Elizabeth Holmes or Trevor Milton style fraud.
We've made it possible to run comprehensive laboratory tests from a tiny sample or a few drops of blood.
We'll have a chain on the seats to prevent people from coming in just for the safety. I don't want somebody to end up doing something and driving this truck off the stage. But this thing fully functions and works, which is really incredible.
Meanwhile, people who were firm Tesla fans all the way back in 2016 are now kind of like this.
Take a look at this. In 2019, he said it would be available in 2020. In 2020, he increased the price and said it would be available in 2021. He also said the feature is worth $100,000. Then again, in 2021, he said that level 5 self-driving requiring no human intervention would be available by the end of 2021. But a few months later, he claimed he never said that.
And this is where people like me come in kind of useful. Well, I mean, I don't know whether he actually said it in 2021 or not, but I do know that he said it in 2019.
Just so we understand the definitions, when you refer to feature-complete self-driving, it sounds like you're talking level 5, no geofence. Is that what's expected by the end of the year? Just so we're all on the same page.
Then again, in 2022, he said it would be available by the end of the year. And now that it's at the end of the year, we're looking back to Elon Musk to tell us when we could next expect it to be delivered. To put it another way, some people argue that buying full self-driving is really no different than giving Tesla an interest-free loan for an indefinite period of time, which would constitute false advertising. Now, when someone has bought full self-driving for the purposes of testing it out on a YouTube video a few years ago, even though it's fantastic on the highway, it's really, really glitchy in person. Anyone who's used it will tell you that it randomly just breaks out of nowhere. Sometimes it won't identify an object until it gets really, really close, and some research suggests that their driver disengagement rate was significantly worse than the competition.
It also comes with a release note saying that you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel and ready to take over at a moment's notice. Additionally, adding that while these features are designed to become more capable over time, currently enabled features do not make the vehicle autonomous. Which is why they call it autopilot. Yeah, that doesn't make a lick of sense, and you can see why people are taking them to court over false advertising, with many describing full self-driving as mentally exhausting, as you're constantly hovering over the steering wheel as 99% of the time the car behaves fine. Then randomly, for no apparent reason, the car might try to kill you. Yeah, now I wonder why Musk was selling billions of stock from his company. But he did reassure Tesla investors that he was done selling stock, which is rapidly becoming the new Tesla full self-driving will be ready next year, promise. And he originally said he would never sell the stock. Then, after selling billions of stock in 2022, he promised he'd finished selling stock there, only to sell more stock later in 2022. Only to promise again that no, he'd definitely finished selling stock now. And that was after he'd said under oath that he would never lie to investors. What, the man who held up completely fake solar roof tiles and told them they were installed on all the houses around him might not be completely truthful? Say it ain't so. I gotta admit, I do find it a little gratifying. You know, a sort of guilty vicarious pleasure to see the headlines of Musk losing the most amount of money in history. I could spend quite a lot of time just basking in that, but the reality is that money never existed. If you valued this video at $1 billion, then all of a sudden don't value it as that. I never really became a billionaire and never really lost it. But if I went around telling people that this video was worth $1 billion and sold 10% of it for $100 million, then that wealth was gained fraudulently. But rich people don't go to jail, do they? Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. And that's today's video. Liking and subscribing is always a good way to support and to make sure you don't miss out on more great content like this. And as ever, if you really like the work of this channel and want to support it directly, you can do it through Patreon. Thanks for watching.
Egypt has had a problem with debt for quite some time. Since the Second World War, the country has typically run a trade deficit, importing more than they export. This has been partially offset by transfers from abroad, such as aid from foreign governments and remittances from Egyptians working in other countries. Tourism has additionally been an important source of foreign exchange for the country, with millions visiting Egypt each year, mostly from Europe, Asia, and other Arab countries. In 2016, the Egyptian President Sisi sealed a deal with the IMF for a $12 billion loan. This bailout was granted on the condition that Egypt's currency would float freely. The Egyptian pound halved in value in a matter of weeks, causing inflation to rocket. Harsh austerity measures were implemented, including cuts to energy subsidies, to try and restore government finances. Everything was going reasonably well until the pandemic hit in 2020. This destroyed the tourism industry, an important source of foreign exchange. The central bank began propping up the Egyptian pound from June 2020 up until March 2022, repeating the same mistakes that had led to the prior devaluation. Once the central bank stopped supporting the currency, it began its decline. Egypt is the Arab world's most populous nation with 109 million people, and it's the world's biggest importer of wheat. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the shortage of wheat, combined with other soaring commodity prices, caused real problems in Egypt. The country reached a $3 billion loan deal with the IMF last October, after again agreeing to let the forces of supply and demand determine the value of the Egyptian pound in the foreign exchange market. Egypt allowed its pound to fall to a new low this Wednesday. It lost nearly 35% of its value since the deal was agreed in October, as the central bank slowly withdrew support. Analysts are warning that the pound has even further to fall before stability is reached. This currency weakness is adding to the pain of millions of Egyptians as urban inflation hit 21.3% in December 2022, its highest level in years. Around 60% of Egypt's population of 100 million people lives at or below the poverty line. Inflation for these people means going without food and other necessities. Egypt has one of the longest recorded histories of any modern country, but modern Egypt dates back to 1922 when it gained independence from Great Britain, initially as a monarchy and after the 1952 revolution a republic. After the Arab Spring and the overthrow of Mubarak, the country endured an extended period of political unrest. Egypt's current government, which has been in power since 2014, has been described by a number of watchdogs as authoritarian and responsible for the country's poor human rights record. Today, debt is a huge problem in Egypt. More than 40% of the country's revenues are used to fund interest payments on debt alone. Egypt is the second biggest debtor to the IMF after Argentina, and October's deal was the fourth loan agreement since the deal in 2016. So the best starting point so that we can understand the current problems is probably with that devaluation that occurred in 2016. Before we get to that, let me tell you about today's video sponsor, Blinkist. Blinkist is an app that helps you understand the most important ideas in over 5,500 non-fiction books, in around 15 minutes each. You can either read or play the books on your phone. The creators at Blinkist are great at extracting the most important concepts and ideas from a book and making them digestible. I sometimes find myself buying more books than I have time to read. With Blinkist, I can listen to lots of new titles on my commute, and if I find one really interesting, then read the full book. I also enjoy using Blinkist to refresh my memory of a book that I've read a while back. Here are some of the books that I'm currently listening to. They have a new feature called Blinkist Connect, which allows every Blinkist premium plan to be shared by 2 different accounts. It's no additional cost to you, and it's free to the person you invite for as long as you're sharing it with them. If you're like me and planning on reading more in the new year, Blinkist might really work for you. Get 25% off Blinkist Premium and enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1. Start your 7-day free trial by clicking on the link in the description box or scanning the QR code. Okay, so prior to 2016, Egypt mostly relied on external benefactors, namely Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait to finance its budgetary shortfalls. Saudi Arabia alone contributed nearly $25 billion to the Egyptian economy between 2013 and 2016. Egypt is quite an important country from a geopolitical perspective, and it has many powerful and wealthy friends, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the United States, and China. Egypt was in fact the first Arab and African country to establish diplomatic relations with the People's Republic in China back in 1956. The Saudis, the Emiratis, and the Americans are much happier with the current regime in place in Egypt rather than the Muslim Brotherhood that they replaced. In mid-2016, a severe foreign exchange shortage began to cripple Egypt's economy, in particular its manufacturing sector, which led to the country formally seeking an IMF agreement. The IMF program, which was struck in November of that year, had a series of objectives. It aimed to facilitate inclusive private sector-led growth, increase labor force participation, especially among women, attract foreign direct investment, and strengthen Egypt's macroeconomic stability. As a precondition to securing IMF approval, Egypt needed to raise $6 billion in external funds, which it did thanks to support from the UAE, China, and the G7. The 3-year, $12 billion IMF loan to Egypt was packaged with a reform agenda that focused on monetary, fiscal, and structural reforms. Monetarily, Egypt was to transition to a floating exchange rate and work to contain inflation. Fiscally, the country was to reduce public debt by cutting fuel subsidies while expanding spending on vulnerable groups like women and children. Structurally, Egypt was to streamline industrial licensing, provide financing to small and medium-sized enterprises, decriminalize insolvency, and simplify bankruptcy laws. The devaluation of the Egyptian pound that occurred when they switched to a floating exchange rate ended decades of the country wasting billions of dollars to maintain the country's currency peg and stabilize the exchange rate at a new lower level. The value of the currency halved, but in truth that was just the official exchange rate.
Still have not discovered the bird.
I still have not discovered the bird. You are correct. I have no clue what you're talking about. Bird. I'm summoning some sluts right now, though. I thought I'd be able to summon Fat Man right for this boss, but no. Oh, this boss. Really need to get some better spells already. Come on, lock onto the right guy. There we go.
Exchange rate started a lot lower, so didn't fall as much. While ordinary Egyptians suffered from a sudden and steep loss of wealth as the currency fell in value, international investors were now willing to invest in the country, and its exports were much more competitively priced. Holidays in Egypt suddenly became a lot cheaper, attracting tourists from all over the world. Additionally, Egyptians living abroad began sending more of their money home in both remittances and investments in the country. Inflation, which had fluctuated within a range of 8 to 15% between 2011 and 2016, rose to 22% in December 2016 and remained above 30% for much of 2017, causing deep public concern and hardship. The 2016 devaluation, along with the IMF's reform program, brought about discipline in government spending and introduced policies conducive to economic growth. The purpose of the IMF is to provide financial support to countries hit by crises,
Fat
creating
son of a
breathing room
bitch,
as they
stop
implement
blocking your
policies that
hoe.
restore economic stability and growth. There are two types of IMF program, funded and unfunded. Funded is when the IMF
Oh,
makes
I
a
just
loan and
died
supervises
on like the
spending,
easiest
and unfunded is
boss
when they
ever.
just adopt that supervisory role, while other lenders make the loan. The fact that the IMF is monitoring economic policy within a country gives confidence to big lenders and investors, making them more willing to step in. Especially in situations where the economic data being reported might be unreliable, investors are able to rely on the IMF as they almost act like auditors of the country. They'll verify numbers like inflation figures, current account data, reserve data, and so on. The first investors to step up to the plate after the 2016 devaluation were mostly emerging market hedge funds who had the experience and knowledge to understand the risks. Other investors who had been burned by the devaluation were keeping their distance. The hedge funds were attracted by the high interest rates being paid on local currency bonds and were able to negotiate agreements guaranteeing their exchange rate when the bonds matured. This type of agreement is known as a repack. It's a structured finance technique where banks create tailored investments for customers like hedge funds. The cash flows from the underlying security are channeled through a swap counterparty to create a new cash flow with characteristics which meet the requirements of the hedge fund investor. These hedge fund investors were earning returns of around 16% a year on these bonds with limited foreign exchange risk. There is, of course, some tail risk, as these were not dollar-denominated bonds where the investors could sue in New York if they went unpaid. They fell under Egyptian law, but this was still a very high return in the near-zero interest rate environment of the time. This was a big trade for emerging market hedge funds in 2017 and 2018, and they'll have made a lot of money from it. They were often investing in short-term, so 3-month and 6-month bills, and as they expired, the Egyptian Central Bank honored the agreements and paid out dollars as requested. So why was Egypt willing to pay this high return and guarantee an exchange rate upon exit, in particular when they were supposed to be letting their currency float? Obviously, guaranteeing an exchange rate for certain investors is outside the spirit of that
Not gonna
agreement.
use that stupid
Well,
fire
it was
spell this
expensive debt,
time.
and the country will have paid out $300 to $500 million in interest per year on it. But in return, they demonstrated their financial stability to much bigger investors and brought in a huge amount of foreign direct investment from investors like big oil and natural gas companies. Once those companies invested in offshore exploration, Egypt could export fossil fuels, bringing in more foreign exchange, which they badly needed. Multinational corporations want to see that a currency is stable and that the central bank has sufficient reserves. Egypt used this fast money from hedge funds to build a track record of stability to attract the long-term investors like oil and gas companies who would only invest after seeing a track record of repayment. A very large number of Egyptians work abroad in neighbouring countries. Egyptian workers' remittances began to grow over this period too, reaching $8 billion in the second quarter of 2017, up by 13% from a year earlier. Bankers reported at the time that the currency black market had all but disappeared after the devaluation, and banks were enjoying improved dollar liquidity. Egypt reduced public sector expenditures under the IMF agreement and curtailed overall spending on subsidies. To increase revenue, the government introduced new fees and a value-added tax. They brought in more money by selling telecom licenses and land. The introduction of value-added tax was particularly hard on the poor, who were already suffering due to inflation. There was one major aspect of Egypt's economy that the IMF program didn't address, the well-armed elephant in the room, the Egyptian military. For decades, the Egyptian military had been allowed to engage in economic activities as a way of reducing the official defense budget. This was also a way of compensating senior officers for their low pay by giving them a way of earning additional money. It started with the military working on land reclamation. The army then got involved in reconstructing infrastructure along the Suez Canal that was damaged during the war with Israel. This military involvement in the economy, while small to begin with, expanded greatly when Sisi, a former army chief, took power in a 2013 coup. As a former military man, he increasingly relied on the military to take major management roles in the civilian economy. The military today has a large and privileged role in the Egyptian economy. In 2015, the president issued a decree permitting the military to form companies or partnerships with local or foreign investors and gave the armed forces a share of the revenue when these companies were sold. He additionally enabled them to retain ownership of the land. Another law that was passed exempted military businesses from certain taxes. Military-run businesses get subsidized loans through state-owned banks, distorting market forces. As the military was put in charge of hundreds of projects across multiple sectors, it's been blamed for crowding out the private sector and discouraging foreign direct investment, which is needed to bring in sustainable sources of foreign currency. Military-owned companies in Egypt benefit from free labor provided by the mandatory military draft and preferential tax treatment. Analysts say that they are run with the same efficiency as the Egyptian military, which I'm told locals describe as organized buffoonery. Without these benefits, these military-owned companies wouldn't even be profitable. It was a mistake for the IMF to allow this to continue. After the 2016 devaluation, Egypt's economic growth accelerated from 2017 through 2019, but slowed when the COVID pandemic hit in 2020. The entire economy was impacted, but the tourism industry was hit particularly hard. In response, the central bank began propping up the Egyptian pound, repeating the same mistakes that led to the 2016 devaluation, and borrowing billions of dollars to maintain the illusion of stability. To make matters worse, analysts started to notice that the Egyptian pound was not moving at all as many other currencies were at the time. Investors became skeptical about
didn't realize I was being
financial
cursed.
position and started to pull their money out. $5 billion of capital fled Egypt between September and December of 2021. In
Difficult when you try to play a build you're not really used to playing.
Global investors and led them to pull even more money out of the country. Wealthy Egyptians took advantage of the unnaturally strong currency and moved their money abroad too. Russia and Ukraine were Egypt's two main sources of wheat, as well as its top two sources of tourism dollars. The war in Ukraine would have a huge impact on the Egyptian economy. Bread is an important food staple in Egypt and is heavily subsidized by the government. The price of a basic loaf has been kept at a fraction of a cent in Egypt through subsidies since the 1980s. This cost the government around $5.5 billion per year before the prices skyrocketed with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The war sent wheat prices spiraling, heavily impacting Egypt, one of the world's largest grain importers, and piling pressure on its foreign currency reserves. The problem wasn't just the price of wheat, it was sourcing wheat. Egypt had to buy wheat from Australia and the United States, suffering higher shipping costs on top of the higher grain prices. In a country where 60% of the population, which is 60 million people, live at or below the poverty line, the price of food staples rising could cause riots and the overthrow of the government. Short of dollars, the central bank began adding restrictions on importers. Under new rules, for an importer to get a bank letter of credit, they would have to deposit the full cost of the import transaction in advance with their bank, plus interest in the required foreign currency. Only then could they apply to the central bank for approval for the transaction. Applying by no means meant that the request would be approved. Importers became suspicious that the central bank was suffering from a foreign currency shortage. Their suspicions were confirmed when the central bank allowed the Egyptian pound to fall in March 2022. But this time the devaluation did not lead to dollar availability like it had in 2016. People quickly realized that this was because the government was still pegging the exchange rate, but at a new lower rate, which was still too high. This would go on to cost Egypt billions of dollars it couldn't afford to waste, while denying the private sector the dollars they needed for imported goods. That same week, Egypt submitted an official request for another $15 billion IMF loan and announced securing around $22 billion in funding from the Gulf countries. This time, none of them were grants or favorable loans. In August, Egypt's central bank governor stepped down and was appointed as a presidential advisor. The IMF approved a $3 billion loan to Egypt in October, a lot less than the $15 billion that Egypt had originally asked for. The IMF said that the reform program it agreed with Egypt was aimed at pushing forward deep structural and governance reforms to promote private sector-led growth and job creation. Egypt is the IMF's second largest debtor after Argentina and has become increasingly dependent on support from Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar. China's appetite for lending to Egypt is very limited as they have many bad debts to deal with both domestically and abroad. Chinese banks financing the new administrative capital have shown concerns over Egypt's ability to repay its debt. Economists are saying that Egypt has been living beyond its means and overspending on big infrastructure projects, like an $8.5 billion Suez Canal widening, expensive military weapon systems, a nuclear reactor, and of course Egypt's $60 billion new administrative capital. The IMF announced earlier this week that Cairo had agreed to structural reforms to reduce the role of state entities, including military-owned companies, in the economy. It said that Egypt needed a permanent shift to a flexible exchange rate regime to increase resilience against external shocks and to rebuild external buffers. The fund also warned that rising living costs could cause political and social pushback. The durability of the shift to a flexible exchange rate remains to be proven, and the central bank may face political and social pressure to reverse course, the IMF said. The proposed structural reforms will take time to implement and deliver the intended results, while reforms aimed at reducing the role of the state may face resistance from vested interests in the country. There's a long list of difficult improvements needed to get Egypt's economy back in shape. The state needs to improve the environment for business, reduce corruption, and eliminate competition from the military to allow space for the private sector to thrive. If you enjoyed this video, you should watch this one on China's Belt and Road Initiative next. Don't forget to check out Blinkist, our video sponsor, using the link in the description below. Have a great day and talk to you again soon. Bye.
The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. This hearing is entitled Investigating the Collapse of FTX Part 1. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening statement. First, I'd like to welcome Mr. John Ray III, who has been appointed CEO of FTX to oversee its bankruptcy, to testify before our committee for the first part of our investigation into the fall of FTX. I am hopeful that the arrest of Mr. Bankman-Fried, the founder and former CEO of FTX, means he will be held accountable for the fraud he has committed and the harm he has caused. He was scheduled.
He will not.
Fill her up.
You're listening to the Cash Digital Network.
We need to roll back the state. We spy on all of our own citizens. Our prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders. If you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of government being way too big.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Cash Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am your host, Dave Smith. He is my co-host, Robbie the Fire Bernstein, and we are taking this sumbitch on the road, coming to a city near you all through 2023. Next up is St. Louis at the Funny Bone out there. Come see us. Those tickets are moving fast, so go grab them now if you want to come out and see me and Robbie the Fire in St. Louis, doing some live stand-up shows, doing a live podcast out there as well. And then the week after that, the last Saturday of January, was it the 28th, I think? It's 28th or 29th? I'm sorry, Rob. I should know that while I'm doing the plug. But we'll be down in Maryland.
Perryville, at Fifth Company Brewing.
Fifth Company Brewing in Perryville, Maryland. Looking forward to that. Those tickets are also moving very fast, so if you want to come see us down there, make sure to go grab tickets now. A live stand-up show and a live Part of the Problem podcast. All right. What's up, Rob? How are you, sir?
Nothing much, man. We got some fun stuff.
Yeah, there we do. We sure do. We sure do. So I guess the big story that we got to jump into, this was a story that our last episode, which actually has gotten a really great response, was us trashing Neil deGrasse Tyson. But I was thinking of I was like, oh, this is going to take the whole episode, so we'll just talk about the Biden classified documents thing on the next episode. And I'm glad we did because the story developed quite a bit more. If you guys don't know, there's a lot of interesting things to this story. It's also just hilarious on a lot of levels that Joe Biden has been busted keeping classified documents in several places that he's not supposed to have them. These were documents from his time as vice president. So it's not like, oh, the current president of the United States had these documents. It's actually been found out that he
Gonna go get me some ice cream.
He had them out of office. So essentially the exact same thing that they raided Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home for. Now Joe Biden's been busted with it. Doesn't look good, but man, I don't even know exactly where to start. There's a lot of different angles I want to go through here. I guess I'll just start with the most obvious and most hilarious thing. It's like, yes, he did the exact same thing Donald Trump did, and holy shit, look at the different responses. Not just from the media, but like from the Justice Department. You know what I mean? Look at how different the responses are. Pretty entertaining, pretty transparent how politicized the justice and the corporate press systems are. So yeah, I guess that's the first thing to mention. I don't know. What would you start with?
Well, the entire racket of the classified information, it seems a little bit overblown. This is a bit of a hot take, but like even the fact that, I guess we're privy to all of these people's emails doesn't really make sense to me. Like, I mean, I've worked jobs that are significantly less important than being in government, and I wouldn't operate with the assumption that my employer could read all my emails. And if I did, I would certainly have a second email address. So it's almost a little bit, I understand why it's done, because we don't want these people being treasonous, selling state secrets. And but it's like, if we're privy to every conversation, it's almost weird that it happens in a platform that's seemingly private, such as your email. You know what I mean? I would think you would almost just have to have open conversations at that point. It just seems like strange expectations of politicians in general, and it seems like there's a little bit too many C's getting thrown on documents that you would like. I don't understand.
Well, that's for sure. That's one of the things that that seems to not get brought up nearly enough with the Trump situation and with the Biden situation. Is like, if you zoom out, forget the specifics, like the specifics of this incident. The real story here is that way too much shit is classified. That's really what it comes down to. It's insane. It's like there's just like the enormous amount of information that's just kept secret from the public is inexcusable. Like, I'm sure you could come up with a justification where, like, in extreme times, there's some information that you need to have that's classified in like very extreme examples. But if the premise of this whole government here is that it's a democracy of the people or something like that, then it's just so ridiculous that they get to keep secrets about anything. And I remember, I don't know if you remember this episode. This was back in I think maybe 2017. We did an episode about, at the time, Devin Nunes was in the House, and he had gotten he had declassified some FBI documents. He had been able to get them declassified about the FISA warrant that they got on Donald Trump. And one of the things that we were talking about at the time that was so interesting about it is that there was like, all there was in the document was stuff that was embarrassing to the FBI. There was absolutely nothing in the document that was like, oh, here's the the name of an active source or something like that. Like, there was no, but that shit happens all the time. When shit gets declassified, you can read through like thousands of pages of declassified documents where there's just nothing in it that you could even possibly justify being classified. It's just like, let's err on the side of secrecy. Even sometimes it's not even that embarrassing for them. It's just, they just make it secret, like, constantly, And then even when they declassify it, they redact it, so we never get the shit that really, would expose. I mean, we get some level of exposure, but never like, probably what they don't want us to know. But there's no type of like there's no type of honest process of like, here, I have to demonstrate why this needs to be classified. It's just, they make it secret. So every president, if you have any type of documents with you, you're almost always going to have something that got marked classified. So that's, in many cases, this is a big nothing burger. And in fact, I don't know with Trump or Biden if there was anything even nefarious that went on here. Like, for all the corrupt shit that these guys do, it's funny that this is the thing they picked. That's why they had to make it with Trump, the day after stories of, oh, there were nuclear codes or something, to try to give you this like impression that there's something crazy serious going on here. When in fact, what it could be is like a document on the process for appeal, getting a FISA warrant. That was just like, oh yeah, they kind of bullshitted to get that warrant.
Oh, and I think that's what makes this so fun, is that we're talking about a nothing burger that they blew up on Trump. But Trump seems to have this cartoon thing. I know you've mentioned it, where it's like you shine a light on him, and it just seems to reflect right back. So here you are, you're making such a stink about how can this guy have these classified documents? This is so incredibly dangerous. And then what does it turn out? I mean, I don't care if either of these people have documents, but it's just so hilarious that you guys made as big of a stink as you did. And then Joe Biden's got the documents. He seems to be more reckless with it. He does not have the power to actually turn around and say that they were declassified. Only the president does.
Right.
So, and in Trump's case, what do they go instantly? They go, oh, these are nuclear codes. This is dangerous. He might be selling secrets. We haven't heard any of that with Biden. And there's a chance with Trump that the information he walked away with was actually how the deep state fucked him over in trying to concoct a Russia collusion story, and that's the leverage he left with. And it would be so embarrassing to them that they're like, we have to go collect that.
Yeah.
Last point on this, this is so government of them, is they go, well, the distinction is that Trump had been notified of this and he didn't immediately succumb to our authority. And so that's the distinction, is that Biden didn't even know, well, I mean, the guy's supposed to be the president. He's supposed to be competent. And so if you're saying that classified documents is an unbelievably important thing, that we can't trust a reckless individual who wouldn't be aware that he just stashed it in his garage or his pen center that's being backed by China, and he's bringing all those fucking donors there.
We'll get into that, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess, yeah, we could just mention that right now. That's another thing that came out of all of this. I mean, I don't know, as I didn't know about this, and I'm sure a lot of other people didn't either. But the first place that they found these classified documents was in the Penn Biden Center. So the University of Pennsylvania opened some like thing for Joe Biden and gave him an office. And yeah, they paid him $1 million. Well, they paid him $1 million to open this. It's almost like his version of the Clinton Foundation type thing. And then what's very interesting is right after they did that, the university started receiving tens of millions of dollars from China. So something there that's all types of corrupt. This is part of the reason why I always say, like, there's a lot of lefties who always harp on campaign finance laws. Like, that's the big problem, is we got to get money out of politics. And I'm somewhat sympathetic to that instinct. Like, I understand that at a certain point they're going, well, the problem is that these private interests buy off the government and then they do their bidding, which certainly is true. But I'm always like, the idea that you're going to write some, it's like, it's the thing is that they're almost bending over backward to not notice what the real problem is. So I always say it's like, yeah, okay, write some rule that says what? You can't contribute to their campaign or something. It's like, they'll always find a way. I mean, look, here you go. China's not giving Joe Biden money. The University of Pennsylvania is giving him money. China's just giving the University of Pennsylvania money. You know, it's like they always have these. Look, the Saudis are not allowed to contribute to an American political campaign. You can't take foreign money for an American political campaign, but they could donate $10 million to the Clinton Foundation. You know, so like, does it matter that they can't? And so this impulse to kind of say, let's get the money out of politics. It's like, yeah, I mean, really, I think we'd prefer to get the politics out of money. But you go, look, the federal government of the United States spends $6 trillion a year. There is no other organization on earth that spends $6 trillion a year. Think of the biggest company you can imagine. It's not even close. Not even close. Okay. And if you're spending, I mean, you think about this. This is more than the GDP of Russia by a factor of 4. I think the GDP of Russia is about $1.5 trillion. At least it was before the war. I don't know where it is right now. But okay, so just think about that. 4 times the entire economy of Russia, right? And more than the economy of lots of the majority of countries. You know, you're moving mountains. That's how much power is coming out of Washington, D.C. And if you have that much concentrated power, the idea that you're going to write a rule that says no one's allowed to try to wield it, you know? I mean, just think about how ridiculous this is. No one's allowed to try to influence that power or buy it off. It's like, no. The only solution here is to like drastically cut down the amount of power. It's like all these other things are just nonsense window dressing. Anyway, so yeah, a totally shady, but I think very typical little scheme that they have going there, which is, anyway, that's where the classified stuff was found at first. Then there was more found. Now, another angle of this that's very interesting is that there's something really fishy about how this all went down. There's a few different levels, but I got to tell you, my guess is that this is an attempt to bring down Joe Biden from inside the House. I think that's what's going on here. I think that Joe Biden, first of all, it's clearly the timing is like, they found this before the midterms and announced it now. They clearly didn't want to like fuck up the Democrats' chance to do as good as they could through the midterms. And then after the midterms, Joe Biden said like he plans on running. And also, I mean, he had said that before the midterms, but he said it after the midterms. And I think for the first time after the midterms, most people went, oh yeah, Joe Biden's running. He's running for re-election because he didn't. Look, everyone was predicting a red wave, and you didn't really get a red wave. So now Joe Biden's more emboldened to be like, hey, look, the American people just basically kind of said they're kind of okay with this. Man. Yeah, you know in his mind, he's like, that's the thing about Joe Biden too. You know, like when he's stuttering and stumbling up there, you know when he walks off, he's like, nailed it. Like you just know inside his head, he's like, fucking crushed another one. But so I think that the truth is that I think there's a lot of powerful people who would like him to step aside and get somebody else in there, and it makes sense. I mean, the guy is, look, let's take a look at how Joe Biden responded to this scandal.
Classified material next to your Corvette. What were you thinking?
Let me, I'm going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon, because as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage, so it's not like you're sitting out in the street. But anyway, yes, as well as my Corvette. But as I said earlier this week, people know I take classified documents and classified material seriously. I also said we're cooperating fully and completely with the Justice Department's review. As part of that process, my lawyers reviewed other places where documents from my time as Vice President.
Boreal Valley, an ancient fabled city. A pilgrim told me that the city lies beyond Farron Keep, and so becomes our destination.
Mine too.
Were stored, and they finished the review last night. They discovered a small number of documents of classified markings in storage areas and file cabinets in my home and my personal library. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn Center. The Department of Justice was immediately, as was done, the Department of Justice was immediately notified, and the lawyers arranged for the Department of Justice to take possession of the document. So we're going to see all this unfold. I'm confident. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I don't know. I mean, I guess we're getting used to it at this point, but it's just so unbelievable how frail and weak he looks. Like look, the man, he cannot even answer you. He can't even talk to you like a person. He's constantly got to look down and read his response, which he struggles to do. He struggles to just read the words that are on paper in front of him. It's fucking insane. This guy's the president of the United States. Like it's so bizarre. And you see that and you go, yeah, I could see where some people wouldn't want him to be, running. They would want to try. This guy could lose. I don't know. Look, they got through 2020 by basically keeping him at home and really doing very, very few events. And he got through the events that he got through. Also, Trump really fucked up by with his debate performance, and then I forget what they were able to get out of the second debate. Was it because Trump had COVID at that time or something like that? But they were able to cancel the second debate. So Trump really fucked up, if you remember, because he just dominated and talked the whole time and kept interrupting him, which is the worst way to debate Joe Biden. Is you debate Joe Biden, you sit back, you let him talk. That's what you're supposed to do. Let him talk, make him talk as much as possible, and then after he says something, you just go, could anyone follow that? Because I don't know what he just said. Can you elaborate, sir? And let him talk more. Like, that's how you debate Joe Biden. I can't believe, by the way, I mean, I'm sure some people told Donald Trump that, but Trump's just Trump, and he's like, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to show he's a bitch. You know, whatever. Anyway, but okay, so they got through the election like that. It was still 2020. You could spin this into like he's being safe. That's why he's at home the whole time. You know, this is just so responsible of him to not be out there campaigning. Can't do that in 2024. Can't do that this year and next year. That's not going to work. And he's also, you know, going to be 4 years older than he was when he ran last time. Everybody knows that Joe Biden against anyone, Joe Biden has a good chance of losing because Joe Biden might have a major moment where he just completely fumbles and can't remember what his name is. Like, you know, there's a chance of that. Now, it seems like they can goose him up for a big thing. You know what I mean? Like, if he has to get through a debate, they can give him whatever cocktail or shit they give him to get up there to go, you know what I mean, get through the debate. But if he's out campaigning like every day, at least a few times a week, can he get through all of these events? I mean, think about it. Can you imagine, like, Joe Biden giving 4 or 5 speeches a month, say? Having to give, like, long speeches? I mean, the moments are just, there's going to be an opportunity every single time for him to blow the whole campaign. So anyway, the reason I'm kind of speculating, and I'm guessing that this is the situation, is the way this is coming out is very bizarre. You know, this has all been leaked to the press by, like, Biden aides. Biden aides found classified information. It's like his own people are throwing him under the bus. And all this classified information, you know, they're saying it's from his time as a vice president. So it's been sitting around for 6 years. Seems a little bit strange that it's after this midterm election. We found it. We found all of it. You know what I mean?
Incredibly odd. I mean, why now? Other than to dethrone him, I guess. I mean, it literally makes no sense. Were they doing a cleanup? Like, what are they even coming forward as the reason why they just discovered this? Yeah, well, Merrick Garland did address the situation. Brian, see if you can find that video. Merrick Garland addressed Biden's classified documents in his, you know, not properly stored or whatever. But that was another thing, like, when I watched that, where I was going like, oh, okay, something's going on here. This seems like an effort to get Biden out of the way. And it would be an interesting play for getting Biden out of the way, because then I guess it would be consistent for getting Trump out of the way to go, hey, we treat this really seriously, that we even took Biden out because you're not allowed to have classified materials. Like, this might be a very good trap for the system always getting rid of people it doesn't want, because, like, someone will always have classified materials. Right. It's one of those, like, bribery, corruption charges in China. Like, everyone has it. Right, and also just that for them to go, look, the entire system just went all in on this is an unforgivable crime. Right. And now to be like, well, he committed it too. And then leave them kind of like, oh, shit, what are we doing now? I like the garage door defense. I'd like to see the Johnny Cochran lawyer for that, where it's like, you know, Trump was in facility. This one had a locked garage door. So yeah. Well, I mean, they're already trying some of this. It's going to be an interesting thing to see. I think that you know, they don't want to Andrew Cuomo him. You know, like, if you were Andrew Cuomo it's funny to even remember back, but how much of a rock star he was for the Democrats, like how much they were pushing him, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, actually he's a creep and he's out and he's never to be thought of again. It's really, really bizarre. Like, I know it's 2023, but like 2020 was not that long ago, and holy shit, this guy was just, you know, they gave him an Emmy. I mean, they were like, he was the hero of the world, and now it's like just not even brought up, not even a person, completely removed from the conversation. And they don't want to do that with Biden, because in a presidential election, it's still going to reflect on them. If, like, you know, they want to get him to voluntarily step aside and let someone else run, and still kind of try to save face a little bit. They don't want to hurt the next Democratic, you know, nominee, especially if they're running against Donald Trump. But so it'll be interesting to see. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Rocket Money. Rocket Money is an incredible service, formerly known as Truebill. If you're like me and you have signed up for some subscriptions and forgotten to cancel them, even though you never use them, you got to check out Rocket Money. 80% of people have subscriptions they've forgotten about. Maybe it's your unused Amazon Prime account or a Hulu account that never gets streamed. Rocket Money will take care of this for you. The app shows all of your subscriptions in one place and cancels whatever you don't want for you. Rocket Money can even find subscriptions you didn't know you were paying for. You may even find out you've been double charged for a subscription. To cancel a subscription, all you have to do is press cancel. Rocket Money takes care of the rest. You got to go use Rocket Money. It's an easy way to save money. Cancel unnecessary subscriptions with Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/POTP. It could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/POTP. All right, let's get back to the show. But anyway, so here, yeah, Brian, you found the clip. Here was Merrick Garland.
I'm joined today by John Lausch, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, who conducted the initial investigation into the matter that I will describe today. On the evening of November 4th, 2022, the National Archives Office of Inspector General contacted a prosecutor at the Department of Justice. It informed him that the White House had notified the archives that documents bearing classification markings were identified at the office of the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement, located in Washington, D.C. That office was not authorized for storage of classified documents. The prosecutor was also advised that those documents had been secured in an archives facility. On November 9th, the FBI commenced an assessment consistent with standard protocol to understand whether classified information had been mishandled in violation of federal law. On November 14th, pursuant to Section 600.2b of the Special Counsel Regulations, I assigned U.S. Attorney Lausch to conduct an initial investigation to inform my decision whether to appoint a special counsel. Mr. Lausch has served as U.S. Attorney in Chicago since 2017. Before that, he spent more than a decade as an assistant U.S. Attorney in that same office. I selected him to conduct the initial investigation because I was confident his experience would ensure that it would be done professionally and expeditiously. On December 20th, President Biden's personal counsel informed Mr. Lausch that additional documents bearing classification markings were identified in the garage of the president's private residence in Wilmington, Delaware. President Biden's counsel informed Mr. Lausch that those documents were among other records from the period of the president's service as vice president. The FBI went to the location and secured those documents. On January 5th, 2023, Mr. Lausch briefed me on the results of his initial investigation and advised me that further investigation by a special counsel was warranted. Based on Mr. Lausch's initial investigation, I concluded that, under the special counsel regulations, it was in the public interest to appoint a special counsel. In the days since, while Mr. Lausch continued the investigation, the department identified Mr. Herr for appointment as special counsel.
All right, so that's basically
Why does he have to make it so fucking boring, dude?
Yeah,
Just,
that's
hey, we found some papers. We're gonna look into it.
It's but essentially well, look, there's a few things that are interesting about this. The biggest one is that's right. There's a special prosecutor on Biden's ass now, just like they had on Trump. That's something you really don't want if you're a president. Now, I guess I got this wrong. This was a prediction that I made about Donald Trump, and you know how rare it is that I get things wrong. But I did say when they put Mueller on Trump, basically what I predicted from the very beginning was I said this will bring him down, and I said they'll find something, and that they're not going to find anything about Russian collusion, obviously, because Trump is not in bed with Russia. That's just a stupid made-up lie. But I go, the guy's been a real estate developer in New York City for all these years. He's Donald Trump. I mean, there's got to be something, and he's getting a special prosecutor on you. It's like a pit bull. They're going to go through everything. Now, this is famously what happened with Bill Clinton. That they put the Ken Starr, the special prosecutor, on him. They were investigating financial crimes at Whitewater. It had nothing to do with Monica Lewinsky. But they were tearing through everything, and then they found that, oh shit, he under oath said he never had sexual relations with this woman, whatever, blah, blah. There, we got him on perjury, and that's it. So if any crime is uncovered, and that was someone like Biden, who's a career criminal, you know what I mean? You're going to have a special prosecutor on you? That's not good. If you're Joe Biden, that's a bad, bad situation for you. So forget anything, even with this classified material. Just having a special prosecutor put on you is very bad news if you're Joe Biden. But there's other things here that are kind of interesting. So number one, he says this was found, as the head of the Justice Department there confirms, Merrick Garland confirms, this was found before the midterm elections. Man, it sure is lucky there were no leaks. You know how there's always all these leaks from the Justice Department? Like when it would be something that could damage Donald Trump's reputation? Man, they really stayed tight-lipped this time. Just convenient. I guess just a great lucky coincidence. They were really able to tighten that up. So nothing leaks, no press conferences had then, but now, after the midterm elections, when Biden clearly wants to run for re-election, now we've got to assign a special prosecutor. We didn't need to assign a special prosecutor when we found out that Biden's family was trading in political favors for money. That wasn't necessary. Never needed a special prosecutor for any of that, but now all of a sudden, we found some documents next to his Corvette, and now we got to it just something about this smells fishy. Something bigger is going on here, and my guess is that this is the beginning of a play to bring down Joe Biden. I think they want to make it a controlled crash. I don't think they want to just humiliate the president, because that could have that could have some unintended consequences of getting a Republican elected, which I don't think is the game plan. But I think this is an attempt to get Biden out of the way, and for obvious reasons, understandably. I mean, again, if you try to put yourself in I don't know, some Democratic oligarch's position, you're George Soros, you're some billionaire, donor to the Democratic Party. What is your number one thing that you're saying, like in every meeting, in every secret smoke-filled room meeting? What are you saying? If what you care about is just the Democrats maintaining power and getting all of your, keeping this crony system going, I'd say every day you're in there, you go, who can we replace this guy with? Who is our guy? Because it's not him. You're telling me the guy who literally can't look you in the eye and answer the easiest question, that looks like a brittle old man, has to look down and read and then stutters through reading this, and then when people shout at him, he looks like he's scared? Right? It's like, come on, that can't be the guy. And so it just seems to me that there's a high probability that that's what's going on here.
Got some questions these assholes got to answer for us. Firstly, what's the nature of the classified documents? Just give us the broad strokes. We're talking nuclear secrets. We're talking about trade agreements. Just give me the category. But factually, give me the category, not just like skepticism of, oh, well, it could have been anything as horrible as our nuclear submarines. Just give me a general idea. What do we think was in there? And then, why was this first discovered now? I mean, where the fuck are the journalists? Just tell us. Like, where were they cleaning his garage? Did they shut down the pen thing? And then I wasn't even aware of the AG aspect, but I guess that's interesting of if they're not if they're not playing politics, so if they knew about this 3 weeks ago or a month ago, why were they not bringing this to light? Especially, it would be highly relevant if it's at the exact same time that they're going after Donald Trump. If anything, they could say, hey, we're realizing we've got an issue across our government of classified materials ending up in not safe facilities, and we've noticed it at both of these places.
Well, do you remember back, I always thought this was one of the more revealing moments from the Mueller investigation. was when there was this BuzzFeed article that came out and announced that there were two co-authors of the article, and they came out and wrote this piece announcing that they had been shown evidence by Mueller's team that Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, had been instructed by Donald Trump to lie to Congress, which already is like quite a claim. You know, like they're claiming they saw evidence. Like, what would you see? That was what is Donald Trump stupid enough to put in writing to his lawyer? I want you to lie to Congress. I mean, like, even if you think Donald Trump's stupid, that's like really, really stupid, you know. But this is like a bombshell announcement. It was a few weeks before Mueller was set to wrap up the investigation. We were like, holy shit! So they got him, and they got him on something really big. It directly instructing your lawyer to lie to Congress. Like, there's jail time coming for Donald Trump if that's the case. And Mueller came out and made a statement and said, this reporting is not accurate. We do not have evidence to show this. These journalists just claimed they had seen it in TV interviews and stuff. I mean, it's pretty wild. I'd love to get like a follow-up interview with one of those guys who claimed they were shown this evidence. But anyway, I remember me and you talking about quite a bit that one of the most revealing things throughout this whole Mueller investigation was that. And it was like like a lie by omission type deal, where as soon as he came out and made that statement, and then after the whole investigation's concluded, you're like, oh, wait a minute. So like, you're okay coming out and making a public statement if there's some reporting on something about your investigation that isn't accurate. Well, where the fuck were you for years when every single day all anyone on cable news was saying was Trump-Russia collusion? The walls are closing in. Mueller's about to nail him for this grand conspiracy in which he conspired to steal the presidency. Like, they were all saying the biggest scandal in the history of the United States of America is going on. This guy's investigating it. He's about to expose the whole thing. And Mueller never bothered to make a statement, to just say, actually, no. He did with the Michael Cohen thing when he wanted to temper expectations because he was getting ready to release it. But he never bothered once to come out and go, guys, just so you know, like, we have not found anything indicating that, at least as of now, you know? Like, so he can come out and make a statement. He is fine commenting on the investigation just when convenient. And you kind of realize, like, oh, that's part of the game, too, to let this speculation happen. So in this case, it's almost like the inverse of that, where you're like, oh, part of the game here is to decide when we're going to come out and announce that we found all of this stuff. And it always, you know, again, it's the inverse here where Mueller and his investigation team, they let everybody think this was the case through Trump's midterm elections in 2018. They let him lose the Senate and the House. That's fine. You know what I mean? Like that, or did they lose the House? They lost the Senate. Anyway, but they let that happen. That's no problem, and didn't come out and say anything. But they will come out and correct, you know, BuzzFeed. So that's just part of like how this whole game works. All right. Anything else on the Biden classified stuff that you're thinking of?
Well, curious to see how it all plays out. It's a very recent story. It's funny because who really cares? It's a couple piece of paper. It sounds like an error. It's just all of the shenanigans around it that make it interesting.
Yeah, and it's pretty damn entertaining to watch people in the corporate press explain why this is nothing like Donald Trump's. As Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC the other night said, that this was the exact opposite of what Donald Trump did. And you're like, yes, it's the polar opposite of having classified material at your house is having classified material in your garage. I can't think of two more different things than those two that, you know, he's like, this is the polar opposite because what Donald Trump did was the worst way to handle it and what Biden did was the best way to handle it. It is pretty funny to watch them jump through hoops. Sometimes you wonder, I mean, I know there's not a lot of people who watch Lawrence O'Donnell's show, but you wonder, like, how could anyone actually be fooled by, like, even your most, like, hardcore, I'm in the MSNBC liberal world, wouldn't one of them go, I mean, come on. He did the same thing.
And how come the archive people weren't even aware of these documents? Shouldn't we be doing a review of these archive people? That they weren't even aware that for, 12 years there were documents just sitting in Joe Biden's garage?
Yeah. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Stamps.com. Stamps.com has everything you need if you're a small business to make your life a whole lot easier. For more than 20 years, Stamps.com has been indispensable for over 1 million businesses. You get access to the United States Postal Service and UPS services, those services you need to run your business right from your computer. With inflation on the rise, every dollar counts. Protect your margins with major discounts from the USPS and UPS rates up to 86% off. You can use Stamps.com to print postage wherever you do business. All you need is a computer and a printer. And if you need a package picked up, you can easily schedule it through your Stamps.com dashboard. Rates are constantly changing, but with Stamps.com's Switch and Save feature, you can easily compare carriers and rates so you know you're getting the best deal every time. If you're running an online store, Stamps.com works seamlessly with all the major shopping carts and marketplaces. Sign up with the promo code PROBLEM and get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a digital scale, all with no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the homepage, and enter the promo code PROBLEM. Stamps.com. All right, let's get back into the show. It really is something, though, dude, that, like, there's so many secret documents that the people keeping track of the secret documents don't even know where the secret documents are. It's unbelievable, like, how anyone puts up with this. Like, in a country, and then the country is allowed to call itself a democracy. Not only call itself a democracy, but insist on fighting other countries who aren't democratic enough to overthrow them and put in a democracy. You know what I mean? Like, but we also just like, oh, yeah, we lie to our people. We can't, like, tell them the truth. So, yeah, I mean, they get to vote, but we don't tell them what we're doing. It's just unbelievable that this is actually able to persist. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. A couple other things we'll touch on real quick. I don't have a ton to say about them, but it was I thought it was worth mentioning that there was this op-ed that was written by Condoleezza Rice and Robert Gates The Condoleezza Rice was the Secretary of State under George W. Bush. Bob Gates was the Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush. Two people who, in a sane world, would never be allowed to talk about foreign policy at all, but they're allowed to write op-eds for the Washington Post. Bob Gates also, I mean, they both had a bunch of government jobs before that. Bob Gates was at the CIA for a while, and then became ambassador, was at the CIA. I think he ran the CIA for a few years, and then he continued as defense secretary under Barack Obama as well. They wrote an op-ed talking about how, look, you won't believe this because it goes against everything that everyone's been telling us, but turns out Ukraine's losing. They're not dominating. I mean, they're winning, but they're losing. I mean, they're doing awesome, and they've totally humiliated Russia, but things look real bad for them. So there's time is not on Ukraine's side, is what they say. So they go, despite how well they've been doing, they're poised to lose. So that's more or less the take of the article. I thought it was kind of interesting that, after all of this propaganda about how, there's all this propaganda about how, I apologize, it was what did I say? It was the Washington Post. Did I say New York Times? Anyway, after all this propaganda about how Putin's being humiliated, and a lot of people who, I talk to in sources who I trust a lot more, like, yeah, no, that's not really right. Russia has taken some losses, but overall, Ukraine's in a very bad situation, and there's really no way they can win this war, even with all the aid that they're getting. So now it seems like some more people from the foreign policy establishment, hawks, not doves, are coming out and going, yeah, that is actually the case. It's looking really bad for Ukraine. Biden responded this week by promising more.
It's very strange that the old school deep state is opposing this war. We even had Kissinger being like, hey, this one's not a good idea. Now you got the pushers and architects of the Iraq war going, hey guys, not sure that this one's a good idea. So it's kind of interesting if you look at it from like that there is a deep state, like who are the characters that are pushing this one, and why is it that these people actually come forward and oppose it?
Well, the interesting thing about that's true with a lot of these things, right, is that essentially there are a lot of people within the foreign policy establishment who have been completely against our policy toward Russia for 30 years. A lot of them, and very powerful people too. And this is true with a lot of these things. I mean, there were people who were against the war in Iraq who did not want to do this. But the neocons won out, and same with their Russia policy as well. They kind of won out. It's like the neocons and the insane, like democratic neocons or neoliberals, whatever you want to call them, the kind of crazy war hawks, have always won out. But people like George Kennan, who was like the Cold Warrior. He was I think he was the guy who created the containment strategy to take out the Soviet Union. He was completely against NATO expansion in the 90s. Like, he was like, this is nuts. Like, we're going to get right back into another Cold War. We just won the Cold War. Why would we want to just start it over again? And there's Robert Gates is one of those guys too. Robert Gates, interestingly enough, Robert Gates was I guess maybe he was the head of the CIA at the time. He was in like the meetings with Gorbachev as the Soviet Union was like right before the Soviet Union collapsed. And these were the meetings where they were promising that, like, we won't move NATO to the east, that not 1 inch to the east line came out of these meetings. And a lot of the other people in the meetings denied that this ever happened. Now the documents have been declassified, and you can read it for yourself. But Gates never lied about it. Gates, after like all those years, was always like, yeah, we are breaking our promise here. We really should. We did say we wouldn't move NATO all the way to the east. Now we moved it all the way from the middle of Germany up to Russia's borders. And so there's a lot of people like that. So it's not just Henry Kissinger. George Friedman, who's was the head of Stratford. Another guy who's like these. Same thing. Thinks this policy is completely insane. Thinks it was insane to aid the coup in Ukraine in 2014. There's a lot of people. William Perry, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of Defense, he's been against this shit all the way back since the 90s. And what's his name? Robert McNamara, who's the dean of the realist school of foreign policy. He's not like a libertarian isolationist or anything. He's basically been saying that this, one of the chief critics of this. So there's a lot of people who are critical of this policy. Now, that's not exactly what Condoleezza Rice and Robert Gates are saying here, but they are at least admitting that this narrative that Putin's just getting his ass handed to him in Ukraine is not exactly right. And the New York Times also mentioned somewhat recently that they were baffled by why Putin hadn't been more aggressive in this war. And that's another thing that just really, you think for such an important story, we're giving $100 billion to this country with the pledge of continuing it going on. You've got a hot war that we are funding on the border of a nuclear superpower. Like, that's a pretty big story. I think that rank up there is like a pretty big story. You'd think that would just get discussed more. Like, it's just something that, like, the New York Times wrote. There's like a throwaway sentence in an article of theirs where they're like, it is kind of surprising. Like, basically they're saying he hasn't taken out all this critical infrastructure that he clearly could take out. And why isn't he doing that? Well, I don't know exactly what the answer is, but whatever the answer is, it doesn't jive with the narrative that's coming out of Washington, D.C. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no, the answer to that isn't like because he's such an evil war criminal and he's hell-bent on taking over all of Europe. It seems more like what his strategy is to not go completely gloves off and fight the most brutal war he can. I think perhaps his strategy is that he thinks we're going to blink first. And he thinks that coming up through this winter, that Ukraine is going to have a very tough time. that Germany is going to have a very tough winter, that America is just going to have been spending more and more money and seems like it's wasting it, and perhaps there just wouldn't be the political will to continue to support Ukraine. In which case, maybe, my guess is that Vladimir Putin kind of wants a way out of this war. I think he has to save face, and I think he can't lose a war for his own political reasons. He can't, like, lose a war on his border. I think there's no getting around the fact that Russia is going to control east and southern Ukraine. Like, that's just going to happen. I mean, I should say, perhaps they grant them independence, you know, something like that. But that it's not going to be given back to Ukraine. I think there's just no way around that. But at least, perhaps, this article is a step in the direction of more kind of establishment warhawk types going like, yeah, it may not be possible for us to just be like, we're going to keep sending them money until they win, you know, and whatever winning means. I guess taking back every region. I've seen it defined by Zelensky himself said they want Crimea back too. And it's like, yeah, that ain't happening, dude. So anyway, we'll see. I mean, Crimea is the reason why when Vladimir Putin took Crimea, like, he didn't kill anyone. Well, I mean, I don't know. Actually, there might have been like 4 or 5 people who died, but I don't think it's clear that any of them were killed by Russian military. But it was basically a bloodless, you know, coup de main type deal. And basically what happened was they had they had a naval base. The Russians had a lease of a naval base in Crimea. And there's a little piece of land, you know what I mean? And they had a huge naval base there, one of their biggest. And then when the government, the democratically elected government of Ukraine was overthrown in 2014, and they installed this new government, they said, well, we're tearing up your lease. You can no longer lease this space to have your naval base there. And so it's not even like people always say Putin invaded Crimea, and he did send in some extra forces, but it's not even like he invaded. They simply left their base. They came outside and were like, nope, this is ours. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, okay, well, this is yours. No one was even going to fight. They have this giant naval base right there. It was like, what the fuck are we going to do? Oh, okay, fine. And Putin, like, joked around about it where he was like, he said something like, he goes, you know, we were thinking of visiting our NATO friends in Crimea, but then we thought it'd be nicer if they came and visited us in Crimea. So so anyway, the idea that Ukraine's going to be so dominantly victorious that they go in and kick out the Russians from there, this is not happening. Maybe this is a step in the direction of living within the constraints of reality where that ain't happening. Okay. Lastly, before we wrap up, I did want to mention, I guess not the best week for Pete Buttigieg there, Rob, huh?
He's been worried too much about the decorations, making things look pretty, bringing in designers, making sure our airports look nice, and not paying enough attention to the software.
Yeah, seems to be the case. So I guess I'm glad we weren't on the road this last week. Seems like a lot of planes were grounded. I
think he wastes too much time on his bicycle going to work. He's not getting the job done.
Well, the thing about it is that, Rob, it's a big job, okay? And he's got a tremendous amount of experience. He was the mayor of the 5th biggest city, you know, in what state was he from again? I can't remember. Yeah, okay, great. Jesus, why am I blanking on this? Anyway, so he was a small mayor, and then he ran for president. So he's got a tremendous amount of real-world experience. He's given a big job, and there's lots of different things that you got to deal with when you're in charge of transportation, Rob. Obviously, the biggest, racism. Then there's climate change. And then once you're done tackling those issues, maybe you'll get around to, like, can planes, you know, fly? Like, but transportation is about fighting racism. We all understand this. Then climate change. They're interchangeable, racism and climate change. And then way down...
I get it. It's because if the airlines work, then rich white people get to go places. Yeah. But if we shut them down, then they can't go places, and then everyone's equal.
Exactly. Check your privilege. We're all equal when we're locked on a plane on the ground. Doesn't get a lot more equal than that. I mean, sure, there's first class. But even those people, they're still on a plane that's not moving. They're not very happy. But I do. I think Pete Buttigieg has things under control. And in case you're concerned about that, he's got a message for you. Here is our boy Pete Buttigieg.
Now that the system is up and running, our primary focus is to determine that root cause. And I've directed FAA to figure out exactly how this happened, the timeline piece by piece about what was known overnight going into last night and then coming out of it. So glitches or complications happen all the time, but we can't allow them to ever lead to this level of disruption, and we won't ever allow them to lead to a safety problem.
Great. Wonderful. That makes me feel better every time I'm on a flight. So you're saying the system can go down at any time, and you have no idea. It worked for 25 years, but now it's a new era where we're just
basically, we don't know. We don't know what happened. I've written a request to be told exactly what went wrong so we can fix it. And you're like, wow, well, that's nice. That's really great to hear. Everything's cool now. Anyway, there you go. Yeah, this is the way the whole system operates. Of course, Pete Buttigieg is the head of transportation in the United States of America, right? Pretty big job. And why is he there? For one reason. Because he dropped out before Super Tuesday and endorsed Joe Biden. That's it. That's why he's there. One political favor, you get to run the transportation for the United States of America. So it's so shocking that it's not working good.
Here's a thought I should probably keep to myself, but I love how Biden has made it a point to try and put people from disenfranchised communities into good positions. Like you had that puppy boy guy on the nuclear whatever, and he was just like, you know what? We need someone without their sexuality. We'll give him a nothing job, pay him a great salary. Just don't go steal suitcases and be in the news giving lectures to kids about puppy play. And he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. Or in this case, you got a guy and you go, oh, we need a gay guy on our roster. We just need someone. What's the easiest position where, you know, you can just go be there? The transportation secretary. Great. Sounds like you're doing something. Never heard of a transportation secretary beforehand, but hey, we're being inclusive. Oh my God, the system that worked forever is failing, and the gay guy's in charge of it. Oh, you know what we need here? I need a press secretary, but find me a black lesbian. Oh my God, you found someone who's less coherent than I am? It's like, it's like they're making the disenfranchised communities look worse.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And the thing about it is that if you just go, I'm going to hire the most competent people, when you get people who are black or gay or lesbian or whatever, then they're really competent. And then you make those groups look great. But when you go, oh, I'm going to hire someone from this group, even if there's someone more competent out there, then you end up finding someone who's not so competent, and you make that group look like shit. So yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. All right, that's going to be it for today. Come catch us on the road. ComicDaveSmith.com has all of the ticket links for me and Robbie. We're going all over the place this year. More dates being added quite often. So we'll be coming to a town near you. Look out for us. ComicDaveSmith.com. For that, go check out Rob's podcast, Run Your Mouth. Anything else, Rob?
Oh yeah, the end of year stuff, funny stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Go check it out. Robbie the Fire, all 1 year.
So fucking funny. Highly recommend it. In fact, everybody, if you're listening to the show, you got to go watch Rob's end of the year comedy special. It's really fantastic. Go check it out. All right, catch you next time. Peace.
Do not be gone for long. Back again. It is no evil. Come again.
Please, beginning of claim. Your Honor, hurdle.
I'm going to have to change my Twitter profile to, no matter how cynical you are, you're still being naive. So we're going to do it. I see Glenn's in the background right now. Glenn, get ready. Bringing you in 3, 2, 1. Sir, how you doing?
Doing great. Sorry I'm late. It's everybody else's fault. My assistant, my teams, everybody but mine. I just want the record to reflect that, but I'm glad to be with you.
And don't worry about it, because I got through the first 5 minutes of what I would have asked you in any case, which was your training and your professional progression in life. Glenn, ordinarily, I would dive into childhood. I won't do it this time, but if you could give us an idea, born, raised parents, what your childhood was like in order to understand how you have become who you are today.
Sure. So I was born in New York, but my parents moved when I was an infant from South Florida, which is where I grew up in the kind of suburbs of Fort Lauderdale. And my parents divorced when I was very young, like a lot of couples in the early 70s did. And, you know, I would describe my upbringing as basically kind of like working class, lower middle class. My mother was a single mother. She worked at McDonald's and those kind of hourly wage jobs to support us. And my father was a nice, good, involved father, but he was on his 3rd marriage very quickly and didn't make a lot of money to begin with. And 3 wives means that you don't have many resources. But I had decent parents. I think the predominant part of my childhood is realizing that I was gay. It was in the, you know, early 1980s. I was 13 in 1980 when the AIDS epidemic began. That was the year Ronald Reagan was elected. There was a lot of social conservatism that was predominant in our politics. And so the first kind of awareness I had of even being gay was associated not with a spiritual sickness, but with a literal sickness. Made me question a lot of things about pronouncements of authority. You know, when society condemns you, you can either like internalize that and hate yourself or kill yourself, or you can try and prove to society that they shouldn't hate you by being very kind of pleasing and appeasing and, you know, sort of the Pete Buttigieg route. Or you can, you know, start questioning authority and asking what their credibility is for having judged you in this manner, and instead turning the light not on yourself, but back on them. And I think that ended up being my strategy and ended up, you know, kind of shaping how I look at a lot of things. And I kind of see that, even though it involved a lot of struggle, et cetera, as kind of a blessing, because I think it taught me, you know, to question things. And when you have this rockier path, oftentimes you develop a lot of skills that you would be without if your path were smoother.
Were you a troublemaker growing up as a kid?
Yeah, I was a huge troublemaker. I was constantly suspended, you know, from like junior high, and then like more serious things in high school. I almost didn't graduate. Yeah, I mean, that was my anti-authoritarianism finding expression, you know, not yet against power centers, but against, you know, my middle school chemistry teacher or the high school principal. One time my best friend and I went to our school in the middle of the night. This was, you know, before everything was surveilled. You could actually still do things without detection. I know it's shocking to realize that there was actually a recent moment in our history where you could actually do things without constantly being monitored, but you could. And we spray painted the entire school with the most obscene and vulgar and offensive things we could possibly think of. And then I made sure that they knew that it was me, but only to the extent that they were just short of being able to prove it, so that I was able to deny it with this huge smirk, knowing that they knew I did it, but not being able to prove it and just refusing to admit it. So that was the kind of mischief that I often found myself into. Yeah, that was, I think, like the way my anti-authoritarianism, you know, is sort of a vehicle for that.
I mean, it's phenomenal, because I was just mentioning the similarities. We both studied philosophy, both went into law, both went to a big firm, then both started our own. I was also a pain in the ass troublemaker, and I did something equally stupid, but even more stupid. I defaced it and then wrote my name, so it was much tougher for the it was
yeah,
much
you
tougher
authored your work. You authored your work. I was an anonymous coward.
Well, I took a hockey puck and like wrote all over the hockey rink, and then I put my name like an idiot. Glenn, I'm going to end this on YouTube, and we're going to go over exclusively to Rumble. It changes nothing from us, but I want to bring it exclusively to Rumble for the real stuff. Removing people, the link is in the pinned comment, and see you there. 3, 2, 1. Okay, Glenn. So you study philosophy, you go to law school, and then you decide to go to a law firm. Quick question: like, why did you leave the law firm? Why did you start on your own? And why did you pick constitutional rights as a focus?
Yeah, I mean, I was never a person who was ever going to be comfortable in some big institutional Wall Street law firm. You know, I went there in part because the amount of money they pay people who graduate from elite schools, as you know, is insane, especially if you grow up kind of feeling, you know, always poor, and then suddenly they tell you they're going to put this amount of money into your bank account at the end of each month. You know, it's a temptation that few of us can resist. I knew it was going to be very temporary, but I also knew that entering that world would forever demystify it for me. I didn't want to feel like there was this kind of place that I never gained entrance into and therefore would never have the actual confidence that I understood it or could thrive within it. So I kind of purposely wanted to go there in order to understand it. But also, you know, a lot of people who do evil or just do banal things also can be very smart. And the firm I was at, Wachtell Lipton, was full of extremely smart lawyers who are very good lawyers, despite the fact that they spend their lives representing, you know, Goldman Sachs and investment banks and insurance companies. They are very skillful in what they do, and I learned a lot. But I just, you know, I stayed 18 months. They tried to get me to stay longer. They liked me. I was doing a good job. I found the work intellectually engaging. But, you know, I didn't want to be representing institutions. I wanted to be throwing rocks at institutions. And I probably should have stayed a little longer because leaving on your own after 18 months is a dumb thing to do. You know way less than you think you knew. It was a much bigger struggle than I anticipated it would be. But for me, I never was really interested in politics in the sense of partisan politics. So this was like the 90s. So the Soviet Union had collapsed. There was no more Cold War. We were supposedly in this peace dividend. It was the Clinton years, dominated by these really trivial scandals. I mean, not, you know, you can elevate them in importance if you want, like, oh, lying under oath or whatever. But the reality is, you know, it's like Monica Lewinsky and Linda Tripp. And, you know, there were some important things like the Oklahoma City bombing that was used as a pretext to try and control the internet before it could even grow. I'm not saying there was nothing that happened that mattered, but I was really not interested in the day-to-day partisan disputes at all. I was much more interested in the kind of conceptual framework that the founders had created. You know, to this day, I find it ingenious, the kind of insight into human nature that they developed in the wake of the Enlightenment that caused them to question things and then built a government to try and curb our worst abuses. I believed in it. And so I wanted to work on that. That was a much greater interest of mine.
And so, I mean, so then you go it on your own, and you're a lawyer at the time of 9/11.
Correct.
And I mean, we're going to get into the, you know, the biggest scandals of modern history that we've been seeing recently. But 9/11 happens. What's your take on it? Not about like conspiracy theories. What's your take on the official narrative? What was your take on the response to it? Is it a case of exploiting, weaponizing government incompetence? And how does that affect your career trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I lived and worked in Manhattan. You know, I loved New York when I was there. And so, you know, 9/11 was traumatizing, you know, in the sense that everywhere you went, on every street corner, there were, you know, everywhere you looked, pictures of people who obviously were dead under this rubble, but desperate family members, you know, were desperately hoping they had somehow, you know, made their way to an ER and forgot who they were or whatever. The smells were very much in the air for weeks. I mean, I remember, you know, it took me like at least a week. I went to watch a film on purpose. And I remember I spent 10 minutes for the first time in a week not thinking about what happened. I mean, it was a very traumatic amount for people who lived there. It was a big deal, is really what I mean. I mean, those two buildings came crashing down. The plane was flown into the Pentagon. You know, there was kind of this sense for the first time in American history in a long time.
I get a faith spell.
The uncertainty of the stability of the country and the society. And so because I wasn't very political, I was, you know, not very critically, I wasn't absorbing political events in a very critical way. You know, I read the New York Times, I read the Atlantic, I read the New Yorker, the kind of things that, you know, well-educated cosmopolitan liberals consumed. And I thought I was basically getting the, you know, the story, often with a lot of, you know, errors and lies. And I wasn't that naive, but I wasn't reading things with much of a critical eye. So, you know, I was angry after 9/11. I thought it was, you know, the right thing to do for the United States to go to Afghanistan and avenge, you know, this attack by going after the people who did it. I was not some immediate radical. But, you know, I think that wore off after a couple of months. And I think the big turning point for me was in February 2002, so let's say 4 or 5 months after 9/11, was the case of Jose Padilla, which a lot of people have forgotten, where a U.S. citizen, Jose Padilla, arrived at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport and was immediately arrested. John Ashcroft, the then Attorney General, was in Moscow at the time and held a quick press conference and accused Jose Padilla of being a dirty bomber, someone who was trying to enter the United States to detonate a radiological weapon, which was obviously very frightening. But instead of arresting him and charging him with that crime, George Bush signed a decree declaring him an enemy combatant, which meant he had no rights. He was in prison for the next 3.5 years in a military brig. No due process, no charges, no access to a lawyer, no access to the outside world, incommunicado. And obviously, as a constitutional lawyer, the one red line you believe the government of the United States can and will never cross is to imprison American citizens without some function of due process.
Jose Padilla, he was a citizen. He was a citizen.
He was a U.S.-born American citizen. You know, he was out of the country. He'd become Muslim. He was born, I forget exactly what ethnicity, but to a Latin American family. I believe his parents were immigrants, but he was born in the United States. His parents were American citizens. He was a natural-born U.S. citizen. And so the idea that we were now in a climate, not only where this is happening, but very, very few people were willing to even ask questions about it, because they instantly got branded, you know, anyone who asked questions at that time instantly got branded as sympathetic to Al-Qaeda, being on the side of terrorists. That really was the climate, not just months, but a couple of years at least after 9/11. That's what really started kind of awakening my sense that something had gone pretty awry here, caused me to seek out alternative amounts of information, and just in general, kind of uprooted my confidence that the American framework, the constitutional framework, would provide this kind of red line that no government would cross. I started realizing that the fears around 9/11 and then the anthrax attacks, which to this day I don't think we know the real perpetrator, that really intensified fears of Americans, because that meant it wasn't just, you know, huge buildings that were vulnerable, but suburbanites in their homes. The anthrax could show up in your mailbox. And, you know, it was this like Bond-like story about this highly weaponized strain. I mean, it was frightening to people. The combination of that put the population in fear, and immediately that fear was exploited to get Americans to assent to things which would have been previously unthinkable. And the more I started thinking that way, the more alarmed I became, the more interested I became, and that kind of is what set my trajectory by thinking, litigating individual cases in a justice system that itself had been co-opted was woefully inadequate. I needed to find a way to kind of have a bigger voice in the broader conversation.
And so that's when you decide to wind up litigation and move into, I guess, investigative journalism.
Yeah, I mean, even that was kind of by chance. I'd started like reading blogs, which at the time seemed radical, and I guess to some extent they were. They were a little heterodox. I mean, looking back, they were, people like Matt Yglesias and Marcos Molitzis. I mean, the least radical people on the planet. But in that climate, these are people who at least were writing in a different way and without constraints. There are a lot of them right-wing bloggers as well. So it took me a while, but it was really by chance. I came to Brazil in 2005, just trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. I met my now husband of 17 years. We couldn't live together in the U.S. because there was a law in place that required same-sex couples just getting immigration rights, so we couldn't get a green card to live with me in the U.S. So the only choice we had if we wanted to be together, which I knew we did, was for me to stay in Brazil, and therefore staying in Brazil obviously required me to find a way to make a living. I couldn't be a lawyer in Brazil. I'm not a licensed Brazilian lawyer. I don't know anything about the Brazilian legal system. And so kind of just on a lark, one day in September 2005, I just hit create blog. I never intended it to be a career. I just was finding a way I had a lot of free time. I was trying to find a way to participate in that conversation as I described, and very quickly found a big audience, in part because of luck, and in part because of, I think, just, skill and work. And then it just quickly turned into a career.
I presume the biggest initial story was the Edward Snowden leaked documents that you broke. Is that the first biggest story that you would say of your career?
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly there was nothing on the scale of the Snowden story. I mean, that's like a once-in-a-generation story, right? A Pulitzer. You don't get those every year. But the reason Edward Snowden had come to me was because he was an avid reader of mine who, remember, Edward Snowden is somebody who believed in the U.S. security state. I mean, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and wanted to go fight in Iraq for what was like his basic training and couldn't, but then went to the CIA and the NSA as a true believer. And through a combination of seeing the things he saw, but also being influenced by several writers, one of them was me, became very disillusioned that this whole thing was kind of a deceit, was a fraud, and he was particularly offended that all of this machinery had been turned not against America's enemies, but inward onto American citizens. And so, my work before the Snowden story, I broke some stories about, Chelsea Manning's abusive treatment in prison that led to the resignation of a bunch of Obama officials. I did a lot of work on Obama's drone program, a lot of work on the war on terror, but I, didn't break any story of the magnitude of the Snowden reporting. I mean, like I said, it's like a once-in-a-generation story until 2012, at the end of 2012, when Edward Snowden contacted me.
And I love to know the details of this. How does he, if you can, just explain a little bit, like, how does he contact you when he does contact you and you know that you're going to disclose leaked documents? I presume they were of classified nature. I mean, classified leaked information. You're making enemies, and also like enemies high up. And you know that once you let this out of the box, there's no pushing it back in, neither for Snowden, neither for yourself. How do you stomach that? What is the psychological process you go through to say, this could put me in danger and this will change the trajectory of my life?
Yeah, I mean, these were not just classified documents. These were all top secret documents from the most sensitive and secretive agency in the entire U.S. government, which is the NSA. For decades, before the Church Committee, the joke in Washington was the NSA stands for no such agency. People were petrified to even mention it. People barely knew it existed. And there had never been a leak close to this magnitude about the intelligence community. The only comparable leak were the Pentagon Papers, which Daniel Ellsberg leaked to the New York Times in 1971 to prove the American government was lying about the war in Vietnam, telling them publicly, we believe we're about to win, but internally knowing they would never win. But in terms of the intelligence community, the CIA and the NSA, there had been nothing on this magnitude. Some of these documents were, the most secretive and sensitive documents that exist in the entire U.S. government, and there weren't a few. It was a gigantic archive of many, many hundreds of thousands or more documents that he provided me. And, the way it worked was he contacted me by email through an anonymous account. And of course, he knew at the time what most of us didn't, which was the extent of the surveillance state domestically. And he, of course, was being very careful about what he was willing to tell me. And so he had a hard time getting my attention because, people always pop up in your email inbox. I'm sure you've had this, hey, I have a big story for you. It's huge. And oftentimes they're crazy, or they, you can't drop everything you're doing the instant that happens. So it took me a while to establish a kind of safe communicative framework with him where he felt comfortable talking to me using encryption that no one at the time, was using. It was very complex and difficult. But finally we got that created, and he said to me, I have the biggest leak in the history of the U.S. security state. I need you to come to Hong Kong in order to meet me and get it. And obviously that made no sense to me because senior U.S. security officials aren't in Hong Kong. They're in Northern Virginia or wherever. And so I told him, look, before I get on a plane and come there, I need to believe that you're real. I need to know that you're not a crazy person making wild claims. I'm not flying to Hong Kong to meet some, insane person. So he sent me a tiny sample of maybe 24 documents. And just those 24 documents, among them were the PRISM program, which was a top secret program where the NSA was collaborating deeply with basically big tech. It was, Apple and Microsoft at the time, and Yahoo and Facebook, where those companies were turning over millions and millions of data pieces every day on American citizens. So just that tiny little, sample he sent me made me understand that this is going to be a life-changing moment. This is going to be the biggest story in journalism in the generation. And as you said, we were going to make enemies of the most powerful. I mean, the United States government, for all we're taught about how democratic it is, they do not fuck around when it comes to their secrets, especially from this part of the government. But, I spent a lot of time talking to my husband when it happened, and we talked about the various risks, and he ultimately told me, like, You know, this is what you were born to do. This is what you went into journalism to do. You know, you don't want to go cover zoning boards for, you know, a local paper, nor do you want to be a puppet of the Pentagon for the Washington Post. That was never your goal. This was your goal. You know, as I talked about before, I wanted to throw rocks at institutions, not defend them. And there was really no choice, even though we were aware of what was going to come crashing down on us. And I got on a plane and I went to Hong Kong and was shocked to find not a 65-year-old grizzled national security official, but a 29-year-old kid. And I did start thinking maybe this was a fraud. And it took me a day or two to establish a rapport with him and then to see these documents and realize it was anything but a fraud. And we spent, 12 days in Hong Kong together, always, very scared of what was going to happen, that the U.S. government or Chinese officials or Hong Kong officials or anyone else had discovered what we were doing in that hotel room. We're going to burst down the door. We were very eager to get the stories out as quickly as possible to give us the protection of that, that kind of limelight. And so, there's a film that was made about it, Citizenfour, which is a real-time documentary that won the Oscar that shows the kind of extreme tension under which we were working.
I'm absolutely going to go watch that. I just have to talk the kids into watching that. But I haven't seen that documentary. I haven't seen any of this, but I only briefly remember living through it. I just practically.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, by the way, now for free. My kids, who hate watching anything that I'm involved in, even they watched that film and they liked it. It's kind of this has this thriller vibe to it because it was, very high drama.
It's nuts. It's the stuff out of movies, but in real life, you're sitting in a hotel room. I mean, you get the documents. How do you vet the documents are even authentic when you get them? Like they're digital and paper, or primarily digital?
They're all digital because that's how he took them. He didn't take any documents printed. That was far too risky. So everything was on extremely encrypted thumb drives. He was, obsessive compulsive about security. That's why he was able to do it without being detected. I mean, imagine the surveillance the NSA is under. The NSA itself is under. They don't just put the entire world under surveillance, but obviously within, there's all kinds of protections that he very adeptly circumvented simply by just being a self-taught, kind of genius when it comes to computer security and information security. And so it was all on tiny little thumb drives. And, there are ways to authenticate an archive of the size. It's the reason why I knew the Hunter Biden archive was genuine. One of the things, or I had a similar archive that was given to me in Brazil in 2019 that the Brazilian government ultimately tried to imprison me for, that led us to very destabilizing reporting about corruption in the Brazilian government. You have this gigantic archive, and as the question you asked is always the question, how do you know it's authentic? So there are ways, there's emails in the archives, so you go to people who are on the email chain that you trust, and you ask them to show you the emails in their inbox, and if it matches what's in the archive, that's very strong indicia that the archive is authentic. You try and match it to public data, but also private data, and at some level, though, there's a leap of faith. Like, you can never have 100% certainty that it's authentic, but you get to the point where you're willing to stake your career and reputation on it. And I got to that point of comfort in Hong Kong, just like I did with the Hunter Biden laptop story and also the Brazil story, where you're convinced that, the documents were of such complexity and some of them were verifiable through non-public means. We had an expert review the metadata on a lot of them to look for any signs of tampering or anything being fraudulent or forged, and got very, very comfortable. And then we went to the U.S. government beforehand with the first story to ask for confirmation, and they didn't deny that the very first story I did, which was about a FISA court order that authorized Verizon, or ordered Verizon, to turn over all telephone records of all American citizens to the NSA. When the U.S. government didn't claim that was a forgery, tried to convince us not to publish it on national security grounds, we took that as confirmation that that document was accurate, and we were kind of off to the races.
An amazing thing you say, like you get the protection of the limelight. So what's the most terrifying moment is after you go to the government and say, care to comment before you go public. That's the point at which you don't have the protection of the limelight, where you're too big a fish to catch now, and you're at your most vulnerable?
For sure. I mean, and I had a war with The Guardian. I was at The Guardian at the time. Obviously, The Guardian is a big, old newspaper. They were being very careful about the story. They were behind the story. They were supportive of it. They wanted to do it. But they were also very, worried about their legal exposure. I had a source, a 29-year-old guy who had just done this incredibly courageous act. He unraveled his whole life to show the world the truth about what the U.S. government was doing, and I felt my primary obligation was to him and then to the public. And so, I wanted these stories published, in part because I wanted to make sure they got published before anyone could take it away from us. Obviously, we hid the material, but, nonetheless, if we're trapped in a legal investigation, it would be a big impediment, whereas The Guardian was kind of being more careful and slower than I wanted them to be. And so I actually got to the point where I threatened The Guardian and said, if we don't publish by 5 p.m. today, it was actually 4 days after I got to Hong Kong when I demanded that when that first story was published, I'm going to just start publishing this on my own, and you'll lose the story of a lifetime. You'll lose a Pulitzer, you'll lose everything. I had also talked to a couple of other media outlets about their willingness to do it, like The Nation, but I was really prepared to just go do it on my own precisely for that reason. I knew it was urgent that we get this material into the public domain as quickly as possible. It was necessary to protect Snowden, it was necessary to protect ourselves, but also it was necessary to protect the story, to make sure the story happened, that the government couldn't stop us. And The Guardian was put in a bad place because they weren't quite ready to publish, but they knew I was serious, that I was going to just take my story and leave The Guardian and go do it on my own. And they decided to publish that first story, and from there published every story thereafter that I wanted to publish, and we had a pretty good partnership over it.
Fantastic. I could carry on with this for much longer, but there's a few other things we need to get discussed before we're done. The Brazilian story. Now, I know that this is going to have a contemporary application. Can you explain what, I understand it, they say in French, en diagonale, like loosely, but explain what happened in 2019 and its relevance to what just happened and what is going on now in Brazil.
So Brazil is a country that has been plagued by systemic corruption for decades. When you look at Western governments, you talk about corruption, you talk about one congressman who takes a bribe, or you talk about legalized corruption, right, the way lobbyists fund campaigns and incumbents in order to get legislation they want. When I'm talking about systemic corruption, I mean pretty much nothing in Brazil happens without major companies depositing millions of dollars into Swiss bank accounts of major political officials. That's how politics works in Brazil. And every political party is implicated by it, but the party that had been running Brazil for many years, from 2002 until 2016, was the Labour Party, or the Workers' Party, founded by Lula da Silva. And in 2014, an anti-corruption probe started. It was started by these young, very zealous prosecutors who, were the next generation and weren't willing to accept that Brazil was going to run forever on this corruption. And they started digging into this corruption. They started putting billionaires in jail. I mean, like, the richest and most powerful people in Brazil. And I was very supportive of this investigation at the beginning, like a lot of people were. These guys became heroes, including the judge who oversaw it, who was sentencing these people to long prison terms, these people who usually had been immune. But after a while, it started looking very politicized. They became obsessed with putting Lula in prison, even though polls were showing, or because polls were showing in 2017, that he was by far the front runner to be reelected president in 2018. He left office in 2010 because of term limits. He was clearly the front runner. They wanted to put him in prison. They did not want Lula coming back. And I started suspecting that they were starting to kind of cross red lines, that these judges were starting to get high on their own PR. And then in 2019, a secret source that contacted me told me that he had hacked into the telephones of the leading judge, who by this point, the one who sentenced Lula to prison, by this point, he was not just a judge, he was now Bolsonaro's, basically his attorney general, his minister of justice and security. So this kind of quid pro quo happened where this judge removed Lula, the primary impediment to Bolsonaro's winning that election, and then in return, when Bolsonaro won, he elevated this judge to the most powerful position in the country. And the hacker who contacted me said, I've hacked into Judge Moro's phones, I've hacked into the phones of all these prosecutors, and he gave me this huge archive that showed immense corruption on the part of that judge who had become the most powerful hero in Brazil and the prosecutors. And we began reporting it, and it was extremely destabilizing to the Brazilian government because that judge was the anchor of Bolsonaro's government, and the imprisonment of Lula was this kind of symbol of anti-corruption. And my cause was never getting Lula out of prison. My husband's a member of Congress in Brazil. He was never a member of Lula's party. He was a member of a left-wing opposition party to Lula. And my cause was never Lula's party or Lula. My cause was that, you cannot have judges cheating and crossing every ethical line to imprison people with no due process. That, he was plotting every day with prosecutors during the trial in secret. So the whole thing was basically rigged. And when we revealed that, it led to the reversal, the nullification of Lula's conviction. He was released from prison. The Supreme Court ultimately nullified his conviction, and that's what enabled Lula to run for president against Bolsonaro as he sought re-election. In this election, Lula narrowly won by 1 or 2 points, and we became, my husband and I, sort of public enemy number one of the Bolsonaro movement for an entire year because they thought we were there to just kind of help Lula. And I think the Bolsonaro movement now understands that that was never actually my goal. My relationship with that movement is much, much better, in part because the Bolsonaro movement, for all the fears people had that it would be authoritarian, that Bolsonaro was Brazilian president would be authoritarian, they ended up really being the targets of authoritarianism, primarily from the Supreme Court, which imposed a censorship regime that makes the one in the US and Europe look like bastions of liberty and freedom. And I've been one of the leading, voices denouncing this censorship regime aimed at Bolsonaro and his movement, and that kind of recalibrated how I'm understood in Brazil, both for the good, but also for the bad. A lot of members of the Lula party hate me now, even though I'm the reason they got to vote for him for president. So that story was a very intense story. It went on for about 18 months. It culminated in my indictment. They tried to imprison me for it. The Supreme Court intervened and said I have a free press right under the Constitution that prevents my imprisonment. But it
Love finding that body.
Story. It's nuts. It's actually nuts that you have two of these. These are cinematic experiences on their own. You have two of them. And now it illustrates also that, like, the history of the 2022 election, 2023, whenever it was, of Bolsonaro, the dynamic is something like the war in Russia, Ukraine, where there's a lot more than most people are aware of because they only became aware of it within the last 6 months. You get Lula out of jail, which pisses off Bolsonaro. But I mean, what happens with the reverse prosecution now? Like sanctioning Bolsonaro's attorney, sanctioning Bolsonaro for contesting the elections? Is this just corruption as determined by whatever the powers that be are? What's the direction of corruption in Brazil?
Yeah, I mean, my main worry is not the return to the Bolsonaro movement. It's the authoritarianism of the institutions that united in the name of stopping him. It reminds me a lot of what happened in the United States, where it got decreed that Donald Trump was not what I perceived him to be, which was, kind of a aberrational figure comportmentally, but really kind of just a continuation of the American political tradition. The idea that he was some singular evil, a new Hitler, was always completely laughable to me. But most of American liberalism, and by American liberalism I mean not just the Democratic Party, but a lot of the establishment sectors of the Republican Party, really did come to believe that Trump was this unique threat. And therefore they united, and that was why that video of Sam Harris's just a few months ago went so viral, because Sam Harris expressed what they were all thinking and that has been driving the United States for the last 5 years, which is Trump is such a singular evil that anything and everything we do to stop him, including lying, censorship, imprisoning people with due process, no matter what we do, the ends justify the means because stopping Trump is such a high imperative. The same thing happened in Brazil. These institutions decided that Bolsonaro was such a grave threat to democracy and everything decent that anything and everything necessary to stop him became justifiable, including implementing a form of tyranny where any dissidents of the establishment, any supporters of Bolsonaro, were subject not only to being censored, and I'll just give you a statistic that's amazing. 10 members of Congress, 10 members who got elected by the Brazilian people, including some with the highest vote totals, all on the Brazilian right, are banned by order of the Supreme Court from accessing any social media platforms, even though those social media platforms have found that they haven't violated the rules of the platform. So the most popular politicians in Brazil, some of them, are not allowed to use Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, anything else. This is, and some of them have been arrested. Journalists are in exile, and so what concerns me, and it shocks a lot of people on the Brazilian left who thought I was their ally, was that I don't regard anything and everything done in the name of stopping the Bolsonaro movement as justified. I don't regard left-wing authoritarianism as better than the right-wing strain, and this is now the driving dynamic. Especially after what happened on Sunday with sort of their own January 6th, that's obviously now going to be used to say that we have to even come down harder on the Brazilian right. Now, Lula is a very pragmatic guy. He has a lot of challenges in governing Brazil. My belief is that the reason Bolsonaro left Brazil for the United States on the last day of his presidency is because there was a deal made that, look, just leave Brazil, stay quiet, don't encourage your maniacs to wage a civil war, and in return, if you do that, we'll agree not to prosecute you and your kids for corruption. And the Bolsonaro family is pretty corrupt. And I think that was the deal that was made. But now that this kind of happened, this leaderless movement, went to Brasilia, and out of frustration and rage, they didn't kill anybody. There was no plan to overthrow the government. It was very much like January 6th, just kind of venting a lot of, unexpressed anger. They entered government buildings. They did some property damage. It was not a good thing. And now it's going to be used, much like September 11th was, much like January 6th has been, much like every crisis always is, to crack down even harder on civil liberties.
It's unbelievable, and it's fascinating. Now, as far as the media goes, you're working with the Guardian back with Snowden. They're reluctant to put this out, but they're still holding the government in check, holding the government feet to the fire. I mean, we're now seeing a media that's doing the exact inverse. Now, whether or not, it sounds like your explanation might be, it's still the battle against Trump, so all is fair in the battle against Trump. But has the media always been like this, but it's just been amplified now, or has there been a moment where there was a radical shift and they became a monster that they weren't prior to?
Yeah, so, it's kind of a shibboleth, like a kind of religiously held view on the American right that the media is left-wing and liberal. And there's an extent to which that's true. Like, obviously, with culture war issues, that's true. It's always been the case that journalists are more Democratic aligned than they are Republican. But their real ideology is not leftism when it comes to things like foreign policy or economic policy. It's adherence to establishment authority. That's really what those media corporations are there to do, is to serve establishment power, much more so than advance a left-wing or right-wing agenda. And so I think people have forgotten that the institutions most responsible for selling the lies of the Iraq War to the American people weren't Fox News and the Bush White House. They did that too, but conservatives didn't need to be convinced. They were lining up behind their party president. What was needed were for liberals to get on board with that war and the war on terror generally, and that's where the New York Times and the New Yorker and the Atlantic and the Washington Post came in. They were being fed lies by the security state, giving anonymity to those people and mindlessly publishing under the front page is true, and that's what convinced at least half of American liberals and Democrats to support everything Bush and Cheney were doing. If you look at the Cold War, that's the role that American media corporations played. So one of my earliest critiques when I began writing about politics, never wanting to be a part of those media corporations, was that they were doing the opposite of what their job was supposed to be. They were supposed to be adversarial to the FBI and the CIA and the NSA and the Justice Department, but instead they were totally subservient to them. So that's always been the case. That's always been true. But at least you have some, examples, some counterexamples. Like I said, The Guardian was behind the Snowden reporting. We did expose secrets. We worked with major media outlets around the world willing to do that. Occasionally, they exposed war and terror abuses and things. It was mostly left to WikiLeaks and whistleblowers, but sometimes media corporations were willing to do that. So I think the problem was there. But Trump, for exactly the reason you just alluded to and that I described in my last answer, did change everything in the sense that they became convinced that their only mission in life is to destroy Trump and his movement. The CIA, the FBI, the Justice Department, Homeland Security are their allies in that mission, and therefore I believe they're more subservient than ever and more willing to spread false propaganda from these institutions than they ever were before.
Now, this question we won't have enough time for this, but maybe if you can pick one, or if your answer is they're all part and parcel of the same thing. The Twitter files drops that we've been seeing now for the last little while, I presume none of it is new whatsoever to you. If you had to pick one element, one aspect of it, or if it's impossible, what is the most important of the Twitter files, the Twitter drops that we've recently seen?
I think it's the union between the security state and big tech and the role that the security state is playing. I mean, and it's an amazing thing if you think about it, that the security state is the dominant force in deciding what information we are allowed to have access to and what information we can't. Who is allowed to be heard on the internet and who is not. These are not decisions being made by executives at Facebook or Twitter or Google. These are decisions being made by the U.S. government, the majority party in Washington, which is the Democratic Party, and particularly these agencies that dictate to, not with the force of law yet, but with implicit threats or promises of reward for compliance. Remember that companies like Amazon and Apple and Facebook have immense contracts they get from the Pentagon and from the FBI and the NSA. They're all in bed together. And so a month before the Twitter files began, two of my former colleagues at The Intercept, Ken Kuppenstein and Lee Fung, got a hold of Homeland Security documents that they published that showed that Homeland Security has a fully formed plan in place to insinuate themselves inside the censorship decisions of all of these big tech companies. That's what that whole disinformation czar was about. They just picked a woman who was way too insane. She was a bridge way too far for this to happen. But, the whole plan itself is still going forward. They're buried in, they're burrowed within these companies that control the source of our information. That's why inside all of these companies, just like in all of these newsrooms, you look up and down the list and you see nothing but former FBI lawyers and CIA agents and NSA, operatives. I mean, the security state has penetrated the key media and big tech companies in American civic life and dictate and dominate and control them. And that is why it sickens me to my core that Democrats in Congress are currently united unanimously to try and block investigations by Congress into these relationships.
People are saying that there's not going to be any solution to this problem to the extent that half of the country approves of it. I mean, what is the advice that you would give to those who say, I don't mind it because it's directed at my enemy?
you know, I mean, the argument that I've been using forever, you know, going back to when I was trying to get Republicans to be concerned about warrantless spying under George Bush and Dick Cheney, or the ability to put American citizens into prison without charges or lawyers or due process, was, look, I know you trust George Bush and Dick Cheney, but what about when Hillary Clinton gets this power? Right? It's like the argument that you try and make to people who don't care about censorship on principle. I mean, you know, they should care about people being censored, their fellow citizens being censored just on principle because it's wrong. But okay, if they don't have principles, you still want to reach them. So you try and appeal to their self-interest. And you say you like the censorship regime now because it's your enemies being being punished and silenced. But if that machinery that you've endorsed the construction of falls instead into the hands of not your political allies, but your political adversaries, aren't you concerned about the fact that one day it's not going to be your adversaries, but yourself who will end up censored? Which is why I thought it was so funny when those handful of journalists, you know, those liberal employees of media corporations who have spent years agitating for a big tech censorship regime, got kicked off Twitter for 12 hours, and they suddenly declared a free press crisis because for once it was them and their friends being silenced rather than their political enemies. It's just very hard to get people to look ahead, even if you appeal to their self-interest. But I don't know, I mean, I think all of us who do what you're doing and what I do, which is wake up in the morning and try and participate in political dialogue and discourse, even if we don't admit it, have within us a certain kind of optimism about the power of human reason and the ability to persuade people through dialogue to see things they may not want to see or to think differently about things. If we didn't believe that, we wouldn't be doing it. No one would wake up and engage in feudal behavior. So I do think that there have been times in the American past, like after Watergate, when people's eyes got opened about these agencies and people were willing on a bipartisan basis to try and come together and limit what they could do. It wasn't very successful. The intelligence community mostly immunized themselves. The reforms were mostly illusory, but at least the truth was dragged out into the light, and I'm hoping that's what happens this time as well.
And last question, because I know you got to go. You got the show on Rumble every night. Glenn, people are going to look at you and say, how do you do what you do? Because your resume, it's not just impressive, it's almost unbelievable. How do you get away with doing what you do where you don't get the Snowden treatment, you don't get the Assange treatment, you don't get fabricated sexual harassment stories brought up from 30 years ago? How do you succeed in doing what you're doing without getting the treatment that we've seen other people get?
Yeah, I mean, I've come close. You know, during the Snowden reporting, I wasn't able to leave Brazil for an entire year because the U.S. government was threatening both publicly but especially privately that if I stepped one foot outside of Brazil, they would arrest me. The Brazilian government did actually indict me and brought 26 felony charges against me, which I happened also to be able to get out of. I do think a lot about how to, you know, manage that line where, you know, you don't want to compromise your core integrity ever, but you have to be shrewd and strategic because if you're sitting in a prison cell like Julian Assange is, your efficacy is going to be reduced. I don't mean to blame Julian at all. There's few people on the planet shrewder than he. But when you become so much of a danger, they're not going to allow you. So I think I flirted with that line a lot. But I do try and think about how to stay on the right side of that line, just enough to be able to continue to do what I do. But there have been very close calls, and I think part of it is luck. But I also think that part of it is once you build up a certain kind of profile publicly, it does become harder for these governments to act against you. We returned to the United States, you know, after a year, myself and Laura Poitras, my partner in the Snowden reporting, even when the U.S. government decided to threatening us because it was the week the Pulitzers were being announced, we were pretty sure we were going to win. There was a polk award that we were coming to get, and so we kind of felt like it made it much harder for the government to arrest us when we were coming to get our Pulitzers and polks, and then left to the rest of the world about the importance of press freedom. So a lot of it is just gambling sometimes, too, about how far you can go.
Amazing. Glenn, I mean, you can find you, Glenn, G. Greenwald on Twitter. The name of your show on Rumble?
Is System Update.
It's amazing. Okay, thank you very much. I know you need to go, so thank you for doing this. I'm going to continue. Well, it's not my computer. I'm going to continue rambling afterwards, but I'll message you. Thank you very much for doing this. Whenever
yeah,
you
I
can
just
do
want to
it
say, you know, I do a lot of interviews. Your questions were incredibly interesting and thoughtful. It makes, you know, being interviewed much, much more enjoyable when you're getting smart and thoughtful questions. And I say that sincerely, so I'm happy to come back anytime. I'll probably persecute you and chase you to come on my show as well at some point. So it was great meeting you and great talking to you.
The same. Thank you very much.
All right, have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Please.
Morning, Your Honor. Morning, Your Honor. Brian Zem on behalf of Flame.
The Last of Us is one of the most anticipated TV shows that I can remember of the last few years. People are really hungry for this. They're clamoring for it. They're also terrified of it because the video game is so beloved, and you don't want to mess that up. Craig Mazin, coming off of his masterful work in Chernobyl, is co-creator of the series along with Neil Druckmann, the man behind the first 2 games. 20 years after modern civilization has been destroyed, Joel, a hardened survivor, is hired to smuggle Ellie, a 14-year-old girl, out of an oppressive quarantine zone. What starts as a small job soon becomes a brutal, heartbreaking journey as they both must traverse the US and depend on each other for survival. I'm not going to get into spoilers for this episode because I'm posting it before it airs, but for future episodes, I will try to post when the episode airs so that I can talk spoilers and it's out there and you can watch the episode and come see the video. This review is going to be about the pilot episode. I'm hoping that I can do episodic reviews of this series. Now that the holidays are over, post-production on Shelby Oaks is definitely picking back up, and so my free time is wavering a little bit, and I'm hoping, though, that I can continue to talk about each episode as it airs. If they're as good as this one, I absolutely would love to do that. This episode is fantastic. It absolutely captures the feel of the game, the sadness of the people who survive after this outbreak, the way the world feels like it's all in turmoil and everyone is just fighting to survive, but not just survive, make it through the day. Everyone looks tired, and they did a masterful job of capturing the production design elements of the game. Everything looks overgrown, the spray-painted firefly symbols, the costume design. This is clearly made by people who appreciate the game. Obviously, Neil Druckmann is a co-creator, so he has a voice here. Video game adaptations generally get a very bad rap. Most of the time, it is deserved. This is not the case, and I'm hoping that continues throughout the rest of the season, because this is clearly made with a lot of love and care for the source material, but Pedro Pascal is just a wonderful actor, and he embodies Joel. He's so good in this first episode. Bella Ramsey has a lot on her shoulders in that she has to take on this very important character for a lot of people, and a character that a lot of people are going to have opinions about. I don't know if you know this, but The Last of Us fandom is a completely healthy environment. There's never been any problems there. She is excellent. I loved her in what screen time she has, because this episode focuses mostly on Joel and this early pre-outbreak situation where you get to understand what his life was like at one point, and you see day one and how terrifying it is. And one of the things I loved about it is that it's also pre-social media in 2003, and so people are kind of just wandering around the streets and hear police sirens, and they see helicopters, and they're like, that's kind of weird. And then they just go home. And they kind of hang out for a bit, and then they hear more helicopters. And nowadays, you would kind of pull up your phone and check whatever's trending and be like, oh my god, what's going on? But back then, the information came slower. And Mazin, who also directs this episode, does a very good job of stretching out that tension. If you play the games like I have, you're aware of what's coming. But I was riveted the whole way through, even with that knowledge. There are so many things working in this first episode that I've already mentioned visually, and the score, and the sound effects, and the fear of these very fast zombies running around. But what I think works best about it is the sense of desperation that you feel as soon as that first outbreak happens, and even the 20-year jump into the future when you see what people are dealing with now. Mazin directs most of the episode handheld, and I don't normally love that, but I think it did something really well here, in that almost every scene feels like that incredible moment in Train to Busan where they're walking through that tunnel and you just feel like a bullet could come from anywhere, and you know that someone's going to die and that anything could jump out at them and just end their lives. And I felt that sense of constant urgency throughout this episode, which is very difficult to maintain, and it sets up such an exciting cliffhanger that I just immediately wanted to watch episode 2, but it's not available yet. I can't tell you how happy I am with this pilot. I really do think that they captured the spirit of the game. I think that they're being loyal to its story and recreating something that is familiar, but I can sense that they will take risks and do things that are interesting with the characters that maybe we don't expect. What I know is that I immediately felt like I was in good hands. There wasn't a single aspect of this that made me go, oh, I'm worried about that. I don't know. Bella Ramsey is fantastic as Ellie. Pedro Pascal, great as Joel. He has that rare actor gift where he can just sit there and stare, and you can read a million things on his face. And I also love how they're depicting Joel as a survivor, in that he's got to do really bad things. He has to see a family screaming on the road as he drives past, and they need help, and he's like, don't stop, just keep going. And that might make him look bad, but that's why he's still alive. So yeah, I loved the pilot episode for Last of Us. I am so excited to continue to watch it. I hope you guys enjoy it too when it airs, and please look forward to more videos about the show, because I am very excited to talk about it. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Look forward to more videos very soon. If you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.
A night in with Mauler and the drinker, getting trashed with the web screen nickers. A cheap night cause I'm feeling kind of thrifty, a big pack of beers and a bottle of whiskey. Hop up a cork, have a glass of wine, I feel safe, I'll be fine. Trouble walking in a straight line before the Pinot Noir. It's open bar with our hosts, Mauler and the critical drinker.
Alrighty, that's our cue,
Hello.
sir. Hello everyone. This is Open Bar 33, so we're really climbing up now. And we're going to be doing it a lot quicker now because we're doing it every week. It's a weekly thing. My God, I don't know if my liver can handle this.
52 a week? Well, yeah, I mean...
I mean, we can try and do 52 a week if you want.
I don't know, man. Crazy things have been done, so maybe.
Well, this is a guy who's done 24-hour EFAP, so that is a lot of fapping.
That's true.
But you guys did it. I don't know how you managed it, because like a couple hours of EFAP, and I'm kind of fucked by the end of it. But hey, you know, glad you did it.
4 times. 5th time is on its way already. It's ridiculous.
Oh damn. But yeah, we've got a few things to cover tonight. We can have a good old laugh at the Golden Globes.
Yay!
Worst ratings ever, apparently. And well, we need some gentlemen to do this with. So should we bring some guests in?
Let's do it.
All right, do it. All right, we've got Nick Rakita. Hello, sir.
Hey, what's up, guys?
It's good to have you back, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a bit, but I'm happy.
Oh,
I'm loaded.
shit.
I've got,
Opened up back
I've
to
got
the
this bottle
swamp.
of,
I
Blue
forgot I
Run
did that.
Kentucky Straight Golden rye whiskey.
Damn, that looks good.
I hear it's good for you, so excellent.
Yeah, well, it keeps all of the government diseases away.
like
the IRS.
Wait, are they not getting abolished now or something? Are you guys not voting to abolish them?
Oh god, it would be so funny. just defund the IRS. Just get rid of them.
It kind of made me wonder, like, how do you pay for things then? Who pays for like the army and stuff to like defend
cares?
America?
The-
They'll just
the-
volunteer.
The army's like, it's all pretend anyway. Like all the money's pretend. I don't know why they even bother taking it from us. They just print it whenever they want it, so it doesn't
Nice.
matter.
Yeah, it's like, oh fuck it, never bother with tax. We'll just print more money. Can't see that going wrong. we just
Why
hang
not?
on
Just
to it.
Monopoly money, okay? 'Cause
Just
that
tax
would-
us to hyperinflation. It'll be fine.
Pay for everything with Dogecoin. Say it's worth like 10 billion a coin.
There you go.
Yeah.
It'd be like NFTs. We just pay in NFTs. Just pictures of money. Here's my $100 bill NFT.
You have a picture of like an ape fucking a bear. It's like, yeah, it's worth $1 trillion right there. We've also got Echo Chamberlain. Hello, sir.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you. It's 10 a.m. where I am, so even by my debauched standards, I'm not going to be drinking. I'm just going to be sticking to my coffee.
I can kind of understand that, yeah. But if this goes past 12 o'clock, yeah, you can crack it. Then it's socially acceptable, so it's all right.
Yeah, good to
but
see you all. Yeah, I saw with now the Republicans are in charge of the House. They've got to raise the debt ceiling, and if they don't, then it causes the global economy to melt down. So this chat, like this dumb idea that they can get around it by printing $1 trillion coin as a way to prevent a default. So that would be so awesome if someone could just hold up $1 trillion coin.
Worth $1 trillion. It's made of graphene.
I remember, was there not an episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns has got like $1 billion bill or something, like, and everyone's hunting for it? And I'm sure the CIA were like, yeah, well, we've had him under satellite surveillance, but all we could determine is that he doesn't have it on his roof. But yeah, well, I was going to start off with this this charming bit of news because you know we love Hollywood, you know, and we love to see them succeed, and so it's always good when they do these annual award shows where they pat each other on the back and they sniff each ot's farts, and the Golden Globes is one of them. Not doing so well though, sadly. They've recorded their lowest ratings of all time. Yeah, I'll go and I'll read the article actually from Deadline. So. Yeah, the Golden Globes returned to broadcast television this year, not with a bang, but with a whimper. NBC's Tuesday night telecast of the 80th annual ceremony brought in just 6.3 million people, according to Nielsen data. It marks the lowest audience ever for the Golden Globe ceremony, which had already plummeted to just 6.9 million last year. That was barely a third of the size of 2020's 18.3 million. Last year's ceremony wasn't televised, following revelations about a lack of diversity and allegations of impropriety. Naughty, naughty. So, yeah, nobody's watching the Golden Globes anymore. I mean, what can you say? Like, if you keep producing garbage and treating your fans like shit, people aren't going to tune in for it. What can I say?
Can't you? I just can't wait. I can't wait for that scene where like they're all sitting in the Golden Globes. You know, maybe like 2 years from now. No one's watching. No one's even like present who's not nominated for an award. Don't they love us? I mean, they love us, right? Right, guys?
It's going to be. No, it's going to be. What they'll do is they'll stream it straight to YouTube instead of broadcasting it, and it'll be like DSP. It's like, oh, we've raised $10 in super chats this session. Come on, we need to get to 50.
Look, guys, if we don't get up to at least $80 in the next 20 minutes, we're not going to be opening the next award. We're just not going to be able to do it. I don't know why you guys don't want to see the next award being open. It's really, I mean, it's not really fair. You sitting there watching the show and not contributing to it, but
yeah.
Might as well be in the witness protection program. That's how much viewers they've got now.
I know. I mean, it's just. Well, this is the thing, it's an entirely self-inflicted wound, isn't it? Like, this is an award ceremony like every other one in Hollywood that's everything is political. Everyone who gets upstage to accept an award, decides that they're going to make this their platform for like whatever socio-political cause that they think is popular at the time. They want to lecture everyone about, how they need to do better and how they need to save the environment, stop using their gas stoves and stuff while they jet around on private planes and stuff. Like, how long do you think you can keep peddling this line of nonsense before people just say, nah, this is idiotic, I'm not accepting this anymore?
I would be the worst rich person. Because like the whole private plane thing, you're all talking about the private planes and shaming and stuff. I would have a private plane to go to the grocery store. Like I would fly everywhere. It would be so cool to have a pilot and a staff plane to take you wherever you want to go. I would be such a bad steward of that.
You know what I would do? I would have a private jet, but I wouldn't actually fly. I would drive it along the road.
Yeah,
it's like waiting in traffic and stuff.
Waving out the windows at people and stuff.
Look, we're common folk.
You're taxing the Walmart.
Just like throwing caviar at them and stuff like that. Peasants.
Did you guys hear what the?
I would have
so
a gas guzzling helicopter to take me to the landing pad for my jet.
tie it to the top of the jet and have the rotors going, while you're driving down the road.
The jet takes you to the jet.
Did you guys see? So FTX, that whole like crazy FTX scandal, and like the documents came out about the expenditures that they did. The FTX employees, they're on like an island, south off the coast of Florida, and what they would do is they'd have packages delivered to a PO box in Miami, and they would send the jet from the island to Miami to pick up the package, and then they just fly the package back to the island. Like they wouldn't even go themselves. They just send the plane, and like a DHL guy hands the delivery to the plane guy, to the pilot, and then they just fly back to the island. That's the type of money spending I would want to do. I'd be the worst, best rich person. Greta Thunberg came up, I'd be like, get on the plane. I don't know where you want to go. I'll take you somewhere and throw you into the ocean. It'll be fine. Commie.
But I mean, this decline in ratings that we've seen, right, for the Golden Globes, this has been across the board with every major award ceremony. The Oscars have gone through exactly the same thing for a lot of the same reasons. People have been turned off by actors, or I was going to call them activists, slip of the tongue and all that. And the whole culture of Hollywood. Like the only reason that people were talking about the last Oscars was because of Will Smith slapping the shit out of Chris Rock. That was it, though. But like, if it hadn't been for that, it would have just been an absolute snooze-a-thon that nobody would have really tuned in for. And yeah, I think we're all old enough here to remember when the Oscars was a big deal. Like it was quite an exciting thing to tune into. You were interested to see who won. You were interested to see all the nominations, like the hosts. The whole event was quite important or interesting at least. Now it's just
one is that. Back in the day, you didn't see these celebrities very often. So if Jack Nicholson came out on the stage, it was, oh, well, it's Jack Nicholson in here, well of music and everything. And the other thing is, I think just this year, the quality of films isn't really that great. And I think that's another factor that's playing into it.
This era, this generation almost, isn't it?
Yeah. I just think it's an average year for filmmaking. There's no clear frontrunner for the best film that I can think of.
Avatar. I mean, I don't even watch anything. What? Top Gun. Sorry, Mahler.
I just said Avatar. Clearly, the frontrunner.
Best movie. It's like I'm sure there'll be people out there who'll be like, yeah, it's the best movie because it made the most money, so of course it's the best.
Right, there you go. We did it.
Saw a bit of Angela Bassett on the Golden Globes. There's a little teeny bit of a disconnect. Yes, she's regal and imperious and serene and gracious, but you were in a comic book film. There's a little bit of a disconnect.
It's a tough one because you kind of have to look at her performance in isolation. It's like, okay, did she do a good acting performance? And I think for me she was the best thing in Wakanda Forever. Like I think she genuinely gave it her all when she really went for it. But it's almost sad because it's like the material you're working with is so shit. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's like I kind of respect the fact that like even though she probably knew as an actor that like this film wasn't particularly good, the script was kind of rubbish, but she resolved to give it her all. It's like, well, that's kind of commendable. So I respect that, and she did give a good performance.
Rewind about 2 years, and that script went through like 5 significant major changes in it. It was changed like 5 times, probably obviously due to Chadwick dying, but also just other fuckery that happens with production. So she probably knew all of that as well.
I think so.
It's hard to be invested when that's happening.
And so there's always a part of you that just feels automatically bad for good actors in bad movies, who still are too professional not to do their best with it, So
but
I respect it.
She seems to be almost trying to like imbue the film with a gravitas that it's just not designed to have.
I think so. I would liken it to Raul Julia in Street Fighter. It's like you've got a really good actor working with terrible material, just really going for it, Just like give it your best, son. Good one. But yeah, like out of every actress across the movie spectrum in the whole year, like was she the best? I don't know about that. Like surely there's got to be other.
Jennifer Lawrence, surely.
Well, I mean, Jennifer Lawrence invented the Golden Globes and the Oscars and movies, but...
Explain to me, why isn't she winning every category, then? What's going on?
I think, yeah...
Best animated film, Jennifer Lawrence, obviously.
I don't know, there maybe just needs to be a special category for her, like Best Jennifer Lawrence Performance as Jennifer Lawrence or something, I don't know.
Some people call it unfair, I think it's right.
Yeah, I think the time is right.
Yeah, like a picture of being John Malkovich scene, like in a restaurant where she's literally everyone at every table.
Yeah, and everyone just says Jennifer. Oh no, Lawrence it would have to be. But yeah, Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere. Really good performance.
Did you see that clip where they try and play music to send her off, stop the speech, and she says, "Shut up"?
No, I didn't see that.
She says, "Shut up," and then she looks at the person, I guess, off to the right and says, "I could beat you up."
Really? She's probably right as well. I think she's really good. She's got some muscle going on. It was quite distracting when I was watching Wakanda Forever. It's like, aren't you like 80 years old or something? How are you built like this? I don't understand. But yeah, that was.
It makes me think about Michelle Yeoh popping up in Blood Origin for some reason. Like that's just something that happened.
I don't blame you. This is the thing. She can do. Well, yeah, she can do amazing things like Everything Everywhere, but then she can also do absolute garbage like Star Trek Discovery and Witcher. And it's like, does she just have a terrible agent, or is it just purely like, I'll get paid a lot of money for this, so what the hell, I'll do it.
I'm trying to imagine her agent, trying to convince her, saying it's The Witcher, it's really super popular. This is going to take you a career in a great new direction, and she's like, I don't know, maybe okay. And then she finds herself in this horrible turkey of a project.
Yeah. Because I think I can understand a lot of the other actors because it's like they're kind of nobodies, and so like any opportunity like this is probably going to seem like a good one. But it's like, you're Michelle Yeoh, like you've been in some fantastic movies, you're an established actress. Like you shouldn't really need this. Like you shouldn't have to stoop to this level. I don't know. Maybe it seemed better on the page rather than like when they started shooting it or something.
It's a shame because you kind of think about it like, I guess Henry Cavill had that same problem, right? He ends up in because he's still got some stuff that works out, like Fallout. That was good, right? Everyone see that?
But then
So,
you know,
Wait, there's a Fallout movie?
no, Mission Impossible Fallout.
Oh, okay.
But then it's like, yeah, I think the problem with that one is like he's ultimately just the antagonist in it, and you know,
I almost wish they didn't kill him because I'd happily have him back. Fuck it.
I would, yeah. But I think we're kind of like that with Henry, where it's just like I just want to see him in stuff, you know, anything, just anything. Give Henry a
Make him
role.
a zombie in the Mission Impossible universe. I don't care anymore.
Why they don't want him to be in anything? They're just allergic to pleasing the audience in any way. They have to show the audience that what they like is wrong, and that what they should like is better. And so when they find out, it's like, oh, I really like this Henry Cavill chap. He's kind of fun and entertaining. Whoa, we can't have that. No, get out of all of our properties. Go do something else, please. Like leave the internet, leave popular culture, because we don't want people to enjoy what they're doing.
I don't think they wanted to leave Witcher though. They're kind of desperate for him on that.
I thought he was out. Like
that's what I'm
already.
saying. Like he was originally he was gonna stay for the the whole thing, but after the 2 years, because he's done one more now, it's just like no, fuck this now. Like it makes a lot of sense because they just shat over it.
Has he ever gotten anywhere near to like an ideal role where he can really express himself that he's truly capable of? Like everything seems way far away from that thing. Like even
I mean,
in Mission
he
Impossible,
was
so
designed to play
different.
Superman, but it's like, you know, they wouldn't use him properly. Like, so he's been shit movie after shit movie, unfortunately.
He's so weirdly underutilized. Like in Mission Impossible, he was so stiff and wooden. It was a weird choice that he was doing tonally. So he's so far away from actually getting that role that we know he's so capable of. Yeah, all these bits and pieces that he does.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah,
guys think about the upcoming 40K franchise with him?
Please be good, please be good, please be good, please be good.
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me about this before, and it's like, on the one hand, I'm excited that he's getting to do a project that he's clearly passionate about, and like I'm sure if he gets creative control over it, he'll make it pretty faithful to the lore.
Right.
But on the other hand, I'm like, I don't see it being a massive commercial success because 40K is just quite a niche thing. You know, I just feel like a lot of people aren't really going to get it. They're not going to buy into it, and it's probably going to be popular, but like a cult following almost. So
Yeah, they're gonna have to find some way to sell this ridiculous look and aesthetic to the world, and they got to be really careful with it. Although I've heard that they're doing the Eisenhorn storyline, and if that's the case, I think they have really good potential because it's basically like just a detective story,
right.
and it's not as Bolter-bornish, so maybe people will be a little bit open to it and kind of just the ludicrous characters and the big grandiose setting.
Because I think they're going to do like Space Marines that are like 8 feet tall and weigh like 400 pounds each, and you know, like they're walking around in power armor. You're going to need an enormous budget for all the CGI and stuff, and yeah, it's just going to be a tough sell. Like
They're giving us Gears and God of War as well, right? Like they're both getting adaptations. So
yeah.
All three of the
Why isn't he-
franchises can be absurd and ridiculous. I don't know. Or maybe they're opening things up.
Is it true that they've cast Batista as Kratos?
I thought it was Batista is in Gears. I don't think Batista's. They're just thinking about it or whatever. For
right.
I don't think he should be Kratos.
No, I mean, it's almost like, well, he can act to some extent, and he's got big muscles, so that seems to be like the thinking behind it. But it's like, I don't know, he just seems to be appearing in loads of things, but I don't really understand why he keeps getting cast. Because like, he's not an actor.
Glass Onion, didn't Ryan Johnson say he's the best actor that came from wrestling or whatever? And people were like, well, that's not many people.
That's a low benchmark. That's up against Hulk Hogan and
yeah, of course, yeah.
John
Hulk
Cena.
Hogan, The Rock, John Cena. Yeah, you're like, there's not that many, and they're not like nobody thinks of these people as like the most amazing actors ever. So it was a weird. I was like, is that an insult or a compliment? Like, you're one of the greatest actors that came from wrestling.
First of all, how come? Why didn't the Macho Man have a film career? That's my first question.
I mean, he got a role in Spider-Man, didn't he?
And the second thing is, Henry Cavill, shouldn't he be doing like Michael Fassbender kind of stuff, like serious dramatic roles, like that kind of thing? Shouldn't he be playing
all kinds of things? Yeah.
Cavill's a nerd though. I actually think that he's very invested in being able to act in like IPs he's familiar and enjoys. Because he likes DC as well, right? I assume. At least, you know.
Well, I'd hope so.
yeah.
It's like I've taken on the role of Superman, but I fucking hate him. God
Sort of good at this point. Like, this is why everyone feels bad for him. It's just like all these IPs he's probably familiar with and enjoys, and he keeps having to play these retarded adaptations of them. So it's like,
it's your own personal hell.
He's doing yeah, seriously, he's doing a Thanos now. He's like, fine, I'll do it myself with the 40K or whatever. It's like, best of luck to him, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's with Cavill, like we've obviously talked quite a bit about it before, but he's like the most underutilized actor in Hollywood. It's just been a series of false starts for him, or roles that he can't really do anything with. So I just have to hope they'll eventually find that one golden project that really launches him. But yeah, who knows? But yeah, I know before we were starting this, we talked a little bit about Ant-Man 3 because I think we've all seen the trailer. It's just come out, and I have to admit, I was kind of surprised. It doesn't look like a typical Marvel current movie where everything's about making jokes. And
lying to you, drinker.
It could
fucking
be.
way. There's always gonna be stuffed with jokes. It's not just a Marvel movie. It's a fucking Paul Rudd movie. Like.
This is, yeah, and like if that's the case, then whoever cut this trailer together and somehow made it look like a serious movie with actual stakes deserves some kind of Oscar, because it genuinely makes it look halfway competent. It looks like a serious story where it's like, oh shit, like this could be it for Ant-Man. It looks like there's something at play here. You know, you've got Kang in it, who actually looks kind of threatening as a villain. And I thought, yeah, they did a pretty good job with this. Have they somehow learned their lesson? Have they decided to make it more, like, more?
Did you see fucking MODOK?
Very briefly, but yeah.
I don't know, man.
It's weird. You know, it's weird because they basically cut the Wasp out of it almost completely, versus like the original teaser, where it was like the Wasp and it was what was Michelle Pfeiffer's character?
Oh, I don't remember her name, but yeah.
The original Wasp, essentially. It seemed to be really focused on both of them and his daughter. You know, she's invented a quantum gateway thing, because that's the thing that teenage girls do all the time, you know, in their spare time. You know, but like this time around, it's like, wow, it's actually focused on Ant-Man himself as a character. Wow, it's almost like he gets to like be in his own movie. That's a revolutionary idea at this point.
Well,
the thing I liked about the other Ant-Man movies is they did like. Muller's right. It is a Paul Rudd movie, so it's gonna have jokes and stuff. But it felt like that was okay. Like they played into the character just fine. He played, he played up the jokes, but the entire movie was still semi-serious in the way that a comic book would be, where it's ridiculous that he's riding on the back of an ant and it's huge, right? Like that's a ludicrous sort of visual, but it still kind of fit everything that was going on. So I have hope, man, that it'll maybe be not shit. But I don't have faith. I just have hope. Faith is dead.
This is the opening of Phase 5, right? So it's going to set the tone, so to speak. I don't know. We'll see.
I take this from the perspective of, I'm not like a big Marvel aficionado, so I look at this from the view of, it's a cool basic concept that you shouldn't monkey around with, where you just have a guy who shrinks down and has crazy misadventures. But then I had to look up what the quantum realm is, and I had to write it down.
I mean,
quantum realm is a minuscule dimension that can only be entered through subatomic particles, whose time vortexes can be used to travel to alternate universes within the multiverse, as was done in order to reverse the blip and defeat the Chronicons. Why can't you just have a guy who shrinks down and has crazy adventures?
I think I think the thing that bothers me as well is like, when they talk about the quantum realm, I kind of imagine it as this weird otherworldly place where like the laws of time and space don't exist, and like, you know, it's crazy because it's like super tiny subatomic world that you're existing in. But then you see it and it seems to have like cities and infrastructure and just like people who fly around in spaceships and stuff. And, like, like sit down and eat food and stuff. There's like a whole ecosystem of life forms there. Like it's just essentially the normal world but small. Like how's that interesting?
Turns out that Herman Cain didn't die. He just went to the quantum realm and implemented his small tax policy. Tax gonna be flat and small.
We all end up in the quantum realm.
Didn't he die? Didn't he pass away?
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
Quantum realm. No.
He's in the quantum realm now.
I'm thinking about American politicians. The thing about the trailer, it does that thing which is becoming like very generic now, where it takes like a classic song, in this case Yellow Brick Road, and it starts off as normal, and then just like in Matrix Revolutions where you had that song White Rabbit, or in Something in the Way in the Batman, it starts off normal, and by the end of the trailer, pounding you with these waves of orchestral synths and things that.
Yeah, that's how they give it gravitas, though.
Very current thing, isn't it? With all like movie trailers now, it's like let's pick a song from between 1971 and 1987 and slow it down a whole lot and put it in a minor key. It'll be great.
Yeah, there'll be one note at the beginning, and there'll be a black screen like the start of whatever the song is. And you're like,
it's like when every.
Sorry, it must be difficult. Like if you see the film, you've never heard the song before, and then you go back and listen to the original song, it must be kind of underwhelming because it doesn't rise to this grand crescendo of mass sense.
It's like when they used to have in every action movie the air horns, like all of them. Okay, we know who's cutting all of the theatrical trailers this week. Got it.
But I mean, like Inception and Prometheus, I remember starting that off big time.
Yeah, it was just the Inception bong, wasn't it? And it just became the thing that everyone did. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's a weird situation that we're in now, where Ant-Man, who was like the least relevant and like pretty much the least interesting of all the Avengers characters, is suddenly like the hope for resurrecting the MCU. It's like, this movie is the one that's going to kick off the entire phase. Like, damn, you know, times have changed. You know?
Especially being like, how many characters even have 3 movies that are solos? And it's like, well, we got Cap, Iron Man, Thor. No, Doctor Strange hasn't even got it. It's like Black Widow didn't. She only got 1. You know, like Hawkeye didn't get any. It's like, yeah, Ant-Man is literally like next in line almost for, but like, you know, no offense, but it just comes across, he doesn't even feel like he's fully integrated yet. He still feels like he's struggling to even be an Avenger or whatever. Then you're like, wait a minute, who even are the Avengers? Like, I don't even know, man. They're figuring that out at some point. It's like, does he have authority? Does he have chemistry with any of these characters? Like, probably not. It's like, so what do we do?
Really important job.
That's the question.
They gave him a really important job. Like that's kind of the funny thing. I mean, like if not for Ant-Man, right? Like the whole thing would have. They needed to have Ant-Man to do all the time traveling.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're right. Though there's like barely interaction. There's no chemistry with any of the characters. Yet they gave him like the most important job. And it's like, oh yeah, no, I can solve this. Like who the hell are you? He was in Civil War also. He had
It was, and like his whole role there was like to be a fanboy, and it's like he can't believe that he's like interacting with Captain America and stuff. And it's like, okay, it's kind of funny. But again, it's playing on the fact that he's just this absolute nobody.
Well, it doesn't feel like he hasn't moved on from that, does it?
No.
Kind of that, like, you know this film's probably going to make fun of him a decent amount as well. Might actually take him seriously slightly more so with that new trailer, but I don't know.
I guess part of the problem as well is like his second movie essentially wasn't his movie. It was the Wasp's movie and her mother. Like that was the entire thrust narrative.
Yeah, he was dragged around throughout that whole narrative.
Yeah, and he was just kind of a background character in his own film, and it's like, well, that doesn't really help the audience to like bond with this character and get invested in him.
That's what I mean, like, I want to see an Ant-Man at this point who's like very confident and almost getting to the point where he can lead, you know, instead of, whoa, what am I going to do about this situation? Whoa. Which is fine.
Help me out as a normie here, but in the original Ant-Man films, he shrinks down, and that's the gimmick and the fun thing about it. So surely the one thing you wouldn't do is take someone that's your main thing, and you put them into a quantum realm where the dimensions are uncertain, and you don't know the scope or scale of things, and so you're taking away the one cool thing about that character. Am I wrong about that?
Even though he's in the quantum realm, he'll be shrinking and growing, but the thing is, everyone else will too.
Yeah, so it undermines the whole point, the whole cool thing about him.
I think that was something I did notice in that trailer was, you know, all the like multiple Ant-Man and the fact that like there could be a giant one, but he's getting like spaghettified and stuff, and it's like. This is now, again, much like with Multiverse of Madness, it's a world where there's like no rules and there's no limitation to anything that can happen at any time, which does worry me. Like, well, okay.
Also, just on that note, right, because I brought up how he might even die, and the people are like, well, no, he's not going to die, he's set to be in whatever Avengers movie. And it's like, no, he can die. They can all die. They're in the multiverse, they'll just respawn, or they'll reassemble, or they'll run back time. They've already done that, so...
Go grab another one.
Yeah, that's what you're saying about stakes, right? It's just, everything's fucked now. There are no stakes for anything.
Do you think they'll get, I don't know, Scarlett Johansson back, or like Robert Downey Jr. back? Or...
As far as I'm concerned, the definite death and desperation of the MCU is when we see Robert Downey Jr. return as Iron Man, even for 5 seconds. That's when you know it's like, oh, it's fucked.
Well, isn't he Iron Deficiency Man now that he's vegan?
he looks legit ill. Like, pictures that I've seen of him, he looks like he weighs about 5 stone, and yeah, he's like...
Dude, it'll get to the point, though, that he'll film his scenes on, like, fucking Zoom with a green screen behind it, and he'll do the rest.
Hooked up to his IV to keep him alive.
Well, they'll do... Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did it with fucking AI, and he just gets paid for the likeness or something. It's
That's
so
where
sad.
acting's going.
It's the next 2 Avengers movies, they're going to be filled with crazy multiverse stuff. We can expect literally... I'm half expecting Ben Affleck's Daredevil to show up at this point.
Oh, God.
I'd pay to see that.
It'd be funny.
It'll be like a 2-pack hologram kind of deal, I think, the next couple of years.
What if they brought in every iteration of the Punisher? Like just all of them.
Well, the Dolph Lundgren version and stuff.
Yep. It's all, and then
Ray Stevenson, Tom Jane. Yeah. Do it.
They're all there, and they just, I don't know, they just go kill some, like they go take out the cartels or whatever.
They just
like,
all have a minigun each to shred some, you know, Kingpin alternate thing.
See, this just makes me sad thinking about like the Netflix, you know, era of MCU heroes like Daredevil and Punisher, all that sort of thing. And just like, oh god, there's a Daredevil show coming out, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's gonna be good though. It's gonna be fun.
No, it's
Don't worry.
not.
It's gonna be funny. It's gonna be Marvelized, so that you know every third line is a joke, and we can just.
And they
have a laugh.
nailed it, man. Like Daredevil was a decent show. Punisher was a decent show. Like these were fun to watch. I don't know
They
how
really
they
did nail it. Yeah.
And they're gonna shit it up. It's all Guardians of the Galaxy's fault, I think, personally. Because that was like good. They pulled off like the balance of comedy and comic bookiness, in my opinion, really well. And then they like started to try and do that everywhere. It's like not every movie is Guardians of the Galaxy, and it doesn't have to be. It's okay. We can have dark stuff. Not like DC where everything has to be dark and broody, like an episode of Angel or whatever, listening to emo music in the background. But like sometimes we can do it, and that's what I've liked about so many of the older Marvel movies or even stuff in the Marvel universe, and not the MCU, but like Logan and stuff like that, and Daredevil and what the hell, Deadpool. Like they could branch out, and even the first Ant-Man, like it's a heist movie within the Marvel universe. Like that's fun. Like set these movie tropes that we understand. Make a film noir, make an action comedy, make a buddy comedy, make a romance movie. I don't care. Like do a romantic comedy or whatever you want to do, but the Marvel Universe gives them flexibility, but they're trying to like homogenize every single thing to look like the same damn show or the same damn movie.
I don't get this attitude at all. They made a law one. It was great. Didn't you see it?
As a lawyer, you must have been blown away by how accurate She-Hulk was.
You know, Mahler, I did watch that. And there's one person on Earth I blame for all of the pain that I suffered doing that.
The worst news about the fact that there won't be a season 2 is I can't force you to watch it.
That was so bad.
I think though this you know, skewing towards humor, like it was a slow creeping thing in some ways. Like it was just, hey, like people are responding really well to the occasional glib joke and like witty observation that we put into our scripts. Like let's do more of that, and like that just gets stacked up movie upon movie, TV show upon TV show, and they don't kind of know when to rein it in.
Come again.
But then you also get movies like Ragnarok, which just went full in for the comedy. It's like, we're just going to take this and make it into a farce now. And again, it did pretty well financially, and that convinced them that, hey, like, people just want to laugh at these characters. They're just fun. Like, we just want to have fun with it and not take anything seriously. And that's why you ended up with Love and Thunder.
Ugh. Yeah, because like it really felt like they're never willing to let the audience sit on a sad emotion for any longer than like a few seconds. They're like, ooh, careful. We don't want them coming away from it thinking this was a sad movie. We want this to be
Someone
fun.
taking on like the TV sitcom idea, something like The Big Bang Theory, where every 20 seconds it's got to be some little laugh line that goes. It's kind of almost taking those contours.
Yeah,
so yeah, all these jokes have the contours of jokes, but without actually being all that funny.
And they miss that comic books have always been able to work in very serious things. I mean, without there being a laugh line after. I mean, when Superman dies, I know it's DC, but when Superman dies in against Doomsday, like, it is not a joke. Like, there's not jokes going through that book. I mean, you're there. It's got the, like his cape is the flag. He's dead on the cover. And then as you read through the book, you're like, damn, like, Superman's actually dead. What does this mean? There's not like there's not some Daily Planet joke line that comes after that. It's just a serious moment. You're let to sit in it.
He gets speared. He's on the floor, blood everywhere, and then Wonder Woman says, "Well, that happened."
Yeah.
Well, finally, he's the one getting speared.
Oh, hell no, this is not happening to me today.
Because this is getting highlighted by like auto-made legendary directors as well, not just us on a podcast sitting at our respective homes. That's what gets really funny about this. Because I saw it thanks to you, Drigger, but Grace Randolph making fun of Francis Ford Coppola's movie.
Oh my God,
production issues. Like, what the hell? She said something like, maybe it's not so easy to make those Marvel movies after all. It's like, what the fuck?
You're talking to a guy who made Apocalypse Now, who made the Godfather trilogy. Doesn't he think he gives a fuck about Marvel films? Like,
that was such a bizarre thing to read. And I was like, she's gonna be punished for this. Like, everyone all over the internet will disagree with this.
I mean, I think she's quite notorious for bad takes, but man, that is next level. Like, to insult a legendary director like that is something else. And yeah, like these guys, like they have struggled through things that would destroy like anyone in the current crop of Marvel directors. Like if any of them were tasked with making something like Apocalypse Now with the filming conditions and the problems that Coppola had to deal with, they would lose their minds. Like, they would quit after like a week.
Dude, that whole generation, like. We've been over this. Like, the directors in Marvel right now don't even get to make their own movies oftentimes. They're told their scenes are done already. They're just there to turn up and be like, "Hello, I directed this, I guess."
Yeah.
That whole generation, they had to go through a baptism of fire with their films. Like Spielberg, when he made Jaws, that was a nightmare for him to make. And with Coppola making The Godfather, like the studio wanted to pull the plug. They hated it. They didn't know what it was. It was an absolute nightmare for him. And then George Lucas making Star Wars, he almost had a mental breakdown, like trying to put that thing together. And everyone on set thought that they were just making a load of rubbish. So they all had to go through that baptism of fire.
Yeah, can you imagine trying to create something so like wildly unique as Star Wars in the 70s? Like, with the it's like cowboys and Indians in space, but Buddhist. With spaceships that like do stuff instead of just like being there on a string, and like they fly around, they shoot stuff, and then there's lasers and laser swords. I don't know. It's pretty cool. Like, what the hell are you talking about? No, how are we even gonna? Why would anyone watch this stupid thing?
Dude, I could imagine when they first saw Darth Vader, they were like, "What is that?" Like,
why is this man wearing a toaster on his chest?
It looks like a bucket on his head. Oh, you painted it black. That'll fix it. Like, turns out to be one of those famous villains of all time. You're like, oh, okay.
I think particularly when you watch the like Darth Vader without James Earl Jones's voice, like when it's David Prowse's actual voice, and like, oh god, like, that must have been a rough time on set.
Nick, if you gave that as your actual literal elevator pitch, and you're an exec in an actual elevator, you just get off at the next floor, like, get me away from this person.
I mean, you would have to just,
security.
Yeah, because you would have to kind of describe it as like, okay, so it's kind of like Lord of the Rings mixed with Star Trek, mixed with a spaghetti western, mixed with fucking Seven Samurai or something like that.
Just trust me, okay?
Yeah. You know, all those things you like, it's everything that you like. We're just going to put it in one package. Oh, and the guy has a sword that's a light beam.
Yeah. That's the thing.
In space, also cowboy.
I mean, for every movie like that worked and like audiences embraced it and loved it, there's undoubtedly like 1,000 other films that failed spectacularly, you know, and tried to like do something equally daring and different and just didn't work. And so there's an element of luck in there, but also like great artistic vision and like having the right people involved in it, and all of those things just came together well to make it. But yeah, now it's like, well, you don't have the kind of constraints that they were working with back then. It's like you don't have to use matte backdrops for your space scenes. You don't have to use like miniatures on you know, pedestals and stuff and moving them about by hand to get the space combat scenes done. You know, you don't have this weird rotoscoping effect for your lightsabers. All that stuff, you can just do it all with CGI, like, easily now. There's not that same kind of constraint, but then it doesn't really inspire the same creativity as well. And so what you end up with is just like pretty looking, forgettable garbage with movies now.
Yeah, there's not many movies lately that I've remembered. I can think of two: Top Gun and Bullet Train.
Yeah,
that's it though.
I can't remember Avatar 2. I'm starting to forget it already, like what I even saw in that film.
You went and watched it. That's your
I know
fault.
it had blue people and bluish green people, and there was lots of water and like a whale thing that. Like,
I know there was a second act. I just don't remember it anymore. There was a second act. It was long.
I fell asleep during Avatar 1. I wasn't gonna watch Avatar 2.
Did you watch Everything Everywhere All at Once?
No.
Ah, we should go to watch
nope.
that.
No personal animus against it. I just I'm skeptical of everything, and so I don't spend much time unless I get some good input on it. So that's why I watched Bullet Train. I heard it was really good. Watched it, really enjoyed it.
I mean, I think if you enjoyed Bullet Train, you would enjoy it. It's not that I'm comparing them and saying that they're the same movie or anything, but like there's a lot of creativity and a lot of like heart and thought that went into everything everywhere all at once. And I think yeah, you probably have a good time with it.
I'll check it out.
But yeah, Bullet Train was good. It kind of surprised me. It was just a lot of fun. And again, just like it seemed like a movie from the 90s or something. I was just trying to have a bit of fun with its concept, you know.
Right, and then like these deeply shallow characters is how I could best describe them. Is like it's like a Guy Ritchie movie where like so much of the character is built into how they look, how they're presented, what their name is, and then you get these little snippets of backstory that that just round them out like enough for the movie to work and be fun. And they really did that with the twins in Bullet Train really well. But it reminds me of what they did with like Snake Plissken in Escape from New York. Like if you didn't read the comics, there are these little references throughout the movies to the comics, but like they were done well enough that you never had to read them to get like interesting tidbits about the character. And that's when they do that and they make characters engageable like that. It just works. Like make character-driven stories, and that's what getting back to the Marvel shit. That's what you have is a bunch of potentially character-driven stories, and they just can't bring themselves to make the characters interesting, even though they've been interesting for 60 years.
Yeah, they're homogenized. That was definitely the thing that jumped out at me about Bullet Train, where it's like it felt like a Guy Ritchie movie in so many ways, and you know it was helped by a really good cast. Like all the actors did a great job. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson was like the fucking standout of the movie as Tangerine. Like it was great. It was just really commanded every scene that he was in. I can kind of see why people are touting him as potentially the next Bond. He's got that kind of look about him. He's got the swagger. He's got the confidence. And yeah, like I thought he was great in this. Like it's characters like that. I think when you marry really good dialogue with a really good actor, you know, you get great stuff. And like Marvel just wouldn't take that risk. They wouldn't be able to do characters edgy like he is.
I don't know if they've got the right actors for him either. Maybe somebody. I don't know.
I think with a lot of the Marvel movies now, you're getting to that point where it's like you've exhausted most of the big name actors, and so you're just casting anyone who's like young and hopeful and just wants to be in a Marvel movie. And it's like, look at the Eternals. You know, apart from like Salma Hayek and a couple of other people, like, you know, Angelina Jolie, like the bulk of them, it's like people I've never fucking heard of, don't care about, just forgettable, bland, you know, vanilla actors. Who
people you recognize here and there from, oh, that's that person from that show, and that's that person from that show.
Yeah, I mean, they're fucking McDonald's actors, where it's just like you eat the fucking Big Mac and then you move on with your day and you don't even think about it for a second longer than you're eating it. And it's like that's the kind of actors that they are.
I never even saw it.
I didn't watch it.
Even the color scheme looks kind of desaturated and washed out, almost as if like
that was it's just bland. It's a bland movie. Like there's no real focus to it. It's a whole bunch of actors and characters. Like the script doesn't know who it wants to focus on. It's just blah.
What do you mean? That was the director movie. That was the one made by a proper director. I remember them saying.
Zhao, yeah. But like, have you seen Nomadland? Like the thing that she was famous for?
No.
It's really. It's a movie about a woman who drives around in a van and just talks to people. Like it's this kind of film that you or me or anyone on this panel could shoot like to the same quality. I think like there's no real artistry to that. And so like to put someone like that who did like a movie that was probably on a budget of like $100 grand, if that, to give her a $200 million effects-heavy superhero extravaganza and expect her to be able to manage it, it was just insane. Like from the people I've talked to, she was in like deep trouble right off the bat. Like didn't know what she was doing. Other people had to basically make the movie for her, and it's not her fault. It's just like she was completely ill-equipped to do something like this. But that's all they wanted. They wanted to bring in an Oscar-winning director to do this film, and so they could say that they'd employed her. That's all it was.
Is Marvel past the point where they can't really do a conventional narrative or character-driven stuff because people just expect they want something additional, meta elements or multiverses and stuff like that? That they can't go back to that other stuff now because people expect that larger dynamics to be going.
It does feel that way a little bit after Endgame's. Like you get No Way Home, which is super. I mean, it's probably not Far From Home came first, but I guess I'm just wanting to talk about the grander scales. No Way Home tore apart the universe. Multiverse of Madness tore apart the universe. Universes, should say. There is a pretty big difference between those two things. But yeah, then of course, Ant-Man and the Quantumania isn't the stakes here that he's going to destroy all the universes again?
Oh, probably. And like,
cool.
You know, and not just the universes, but like all the time as well. And
yeah. So the stakes become so gigantic that it becomes almost banal in a way.
Yeah, I think it's like scope creep, isn't it?
And but that's the problem with doing. So we always talked about a couple different genres or types of. When I was a writing major, I guess, we always talk about different types of genre writing. You basically have character-driven plots, or character-driven stories, you have plot-driven stories. And then you have universe-driven stories, which we never talked about in college, but I became familiar with as I got into like 40K and then watching reading through Star Wars Extended Universe and Dune. Like you develop this thing, and that's what's going on with Marvel, is everything has to be catastrophic within the universe on like the grand scale. There always has to be stakes. And it's amazing because even though, you know, like 40K has had critical universe issues the entire time, they still manage to sometimes tell really good stories on really small scales, and it works. And it works within MCU also. or with Marvel fans, I should say, because we see stuff like, well, like we were talking about the Netflix series, is they're popular, they're successful, and the stakes for the Punisher are literally just his own revenge plot and dealing and grappling with his own loss. And like that deeply personal, character-driven story works just fine, and they don't need a multiverse for the audience to understand it. In fact, we all probably understand it a little bit better than having to be shrunk down to the quantum level to go find our next adventure, is the idea of loss and dealing with it. And if they would just get back to doing that, you'll sell those stories all day. The characters are interesting and compelling, and they have been forever. If you get a competent actor and you take any risk on a script, you're gonna do it. You don't need to end the world every single day. Daredevil showed us this, Punisher showed us this, Luke Cage showed us this. And these movies or these shows are just fine. They could do it with movies too. They just have they don't have any stones to write a movie. They want to make a spectacle.
The funny thing is, the multiverse stuff we've done to this point, I'm pretty sure is all just superfluous, right? Because like Kang is in this, he's going to be set up in this. Going forward, it'll be, I assume Loki season 2 will be the next reference, and then we're going to be running into the Avengers films where Kang is the bad guy. So arguably,
Kang Dynasty as well, haven't you? The TV show.
Yeah, that too. So arguably, this, like the Ant-Man movie, this is going to be more important than any to the multiverse storyline that we're getting, which makes you look back and be like, so what was the fucking point of the Doctor Strange and Spider-Man ones? It's like they just used the multiverse to get more shit, to show you more shit.
I think that was like almost like an aborted attempt to introduce the multiverse, but it's like they half-heartedly did it, and then we're like, nah, it's too difficult, it's too big concept. We might leave that for now.
I can see it just being like we're doing multiverse in this era of Marvel. If you guys want to go ahead, and it's like Spider-Man, you know, I guess they were like, well, we can grab up Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. People fucking love them. We'll just have them in and write them properly, and then people like it. It's like, yeah, that can work out, and it, you know, it did. But Multiverse of Madness, what was that? Like, we'll go to a universe that is the same as the current one, but there's more plants everywhere. What else are you gonna do? It's like, well, there's a paint universe. We go in for about a second. You're like, okay. We'll have Reed Richards. You're like, oh, Reed Richards. We'll kill him. Okay.
Wait, so there was a paint universe, like a Monet painting?
It was
no,
just like paint
it's kind of
everywhere.
like everyone's made of paint. So like if you jumped against a wall, you were just gonna splat everywhere like you're made of paint. Like
They steal that from Skyrim when you go into that painting for the one quest.
it makes me it just like raises questions for me where I'm like, okay, paint is I'm pretty sure is a man-made substance. So like how did paint dinosaurs exist? How did paint fucking like Ice Age people exist? Like how did any of that happen?
I would go as far as saying I would have preferred seeing more of that shit. Actually, like just running through all crazy ideas instead. Like the craziest they went was, I remember the behind the scenes. They were like, we have like 3 different New York cities that we've got to try and portray this film for the Jordan. It's like, why was that your idea? Like New York City, but now it's grass everywhere. New York City, but the buildings are falling apart. You're like, okay.
Well, it was like New York City, but everything's free apparently. Like, why?
Well, no, it wasn't. She said it was, but it wasn't. She's a dumbass.
Oh yeah. Well, she's kind of like, oh, well, most other universes I go to, everything's just free. You can just go to a hot dog vendor and take what you want.
Considering she apparently discovers that by just stealing shit, I'm starting to wonder just how many of them were actually free. Well, I didn't get in trouble.
She's like running away like when the cops are chasing her. Like, it's free, okay, just leave me alone.
Well, I love the subtle. They always have to do the subtle dig at capitalism, right? Like, here's a stupid universe, you have to pay for everything. Everywhere else is great and free. Okay, we get
it. Like in these other universes, like hot dog vendors just spend all day grilling hot dogs because they fucking love doing it. Like they just love giving it away for free. Like, really, do they? It's like, yeah, people do things because they get paid for them. That's the whole underpinning of like human nature. Like you don't just do things for the love of like.
That's what I said in my video. It's like, yeah, we haven't cracked infinite resources, so there you go. Lesson learned, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why this is hard for American child. Like, holy shit, that movie like 16. Someone needs to tell her about economics, I guess. I don't know.
She still runs like a toddler. Like she's not learned how to run properly.
She's got a hero run.
Yeah. It's just really obvious. Like I'm running on the spot, pretending to like run because there's a green screen behind me. You know.
She's from the Ezra Miller School of how to run as a superhero.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think there's only one student in that school. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone run like that other day.
Yeah. It's like Robert Patrick from Terminator 2 if he was drunk and high and retarded all at the same time.
High and retarded.
Very squishy.
There was something else I was going to bring up as well. It's, I don't know, like, it's probably best if I just show you it. So, hold on a second. For all the people watching us, there's a new show coming out. And for people who are older, like you will remember Scooby-Doo and the mystery van and stuff, and like all that good stuff from when we were kids. But Velma now has got her own show, and
everyone stopped sighing immediately.
I wanted to show you a screen grab from it, I suppose. Like,
oh god.
This is what it's going to look like. This is what Velma is now. So just in the little box here, you've got like how Velma and Daphne used to look, and this is what they have become. Yeah. And it's written by Mindy Kaling, who, if you probably remember her as the most annoying character in The Office, and someone who did the Mindy Project, which was about as funny as She-Hulk, I would say. I should probably.
It's weird because, you know, I think maybe this is going to be an ordinary week, or maybe I'm going to have to like struggle to think a little bit about what I can make a video about, and then clang, here comes the thing that I can do. It's like being in the Blitz in London. Like there's a day of calm, and then there goes the air raid siren.
Yeah.
What's worth mentioning, by the way, the whole Scooby Gang is in this show except Scooby-Doo.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's not Shaggy.
That's not Shaggy. But I love how they made him a stoner loser, just like Shaggy from the original.
Wearing a green shirt.
Well, yeah, but they wanted to like smash stereotypes by making him a black man. It's like, do you not see the optics of this? Like, come on.
That's the funniest thing.
Does he help them break into houses and steal stuff too? That'd be helpful.
It's like, why are you doing this?
because what they've done is they've gone all the way around in a circle where they've turned him into the kind of black side comedy character that he used to have, that was dated now, that they used to have in the 80s or 90s.
Yes.
Damon Wayans would play that character,
Yeah.
and his lines would be like I was saying before, like, this is not going to happen to me today, or
Oh,
say
hell no.
what, or damn, would be that character.
Yeah.
So they've actually tried to empower the character by making it diverse, but they've taken it back 20 or 30 years to that old trope and stereotype. So dumb.
So essentially, like from what I gathered from this trailer, like Velma is now a black lesbian, and yeah, Shaggy is now a black stoner.
And Daphne is vaguely Asian with red hair.
Yeah, and there's kind of an implication of a romance there, and I'm just like, oh god, why does it have to be this? Why do you have to do this? Why do you have to just like ruin everything? Like the Scooby-Doo show from when we were kids was just a bunch of goofy arseholes who went around in a van and solved mysteries. It was tongue-in-cheek, it was cheesy, it was fun. That was all it was. We didn't waste time on like wondering about the character's sexuality. We didn't worry about like the patriarchy or oppression or any of this other absolute garbage that like everything that we make now has to be laden with. And it was better for it. It was just fun. This looks horrific, and it's not even funny. Like based on that trailer, it was about the same level of funniness as She-Hulk, probably less so.
You know what my first association was Star Trek Lower Decks, the same kind of animated
style.
thing. Yeah,
Cal-Arts
same
bullshit.
drama
Yeah,
team,
Cal-Arts.
same sort of self-deprecating, snarky characters. Fred, by the way, now is a complete narcissist.
Of course he is, yeah, and I bet he's dumb as fuck as well, because of
Yeah.
course
Well,
he has to be.
We did see him like knock over a brick wall onto himself and Velma, and which should have killed them. And that would probably be better if they just died right then and the show was over forever.
His like first line in the trailer is he can't see people who aren't hot or something, right?
Yeah.
That was funny though.
Well, I mean,
it's
Velma-
absolutely true as well.
I don't see people who aren't hot.
it just tells you like, oh, that's what they're gonna be making Fred. That's gonna be as far as it goes.
It reminds me of this dude I went to high school with. His name was Thor, and he's huge. And this hot chick walked up to him, and he just turned and walked away from her. Like she was talking, and he fucked off. He didn't say anything. And I was like, dude, what was that all about? And he goes, she has fat girl potential.
Is she like a grenade? You know, someone's just waiting to pull the pin.
Yeah, it's like, damn. That's what Fred reminded me of in the trailer. I was like, oh shit, fat girl potential Velma.
But the thing is, like, you could probably have fun with that, but it's like they won't play it that way. They'll play him as just like a complete idiot that you're meant to like make fun of throughout
Right,
the show.
you're supposed to hate him instead of thinking this is endearing.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was ahead of his time in the original series. He was ahead of his time with that metrosexual scarf that he would rock. Remember that?
Well, that was the 70s, man. I mean, that was just anything went back then, didn't it?
Hell yeah.
But now I wonder like who on earth is this pitched at? Because I genuinely don't understand.
Can I just say though, the memes to me are just funny because oftentimes we'll say like, "Oh, new version of thing is coming out. Oh, I guess that thing will be a black lesbian." That's like the joke.
Yeah, it's like literally is.
Like they have actually realized the meme. Like Velma is a black lesbian now. Like what?
The thing is, if the four of us had sat around for an hour and facetiously tried to come up with a modern interpretation of what this would be the thing we would come up with. It's so strange.
Apparently, it's a cravat, not a scarf. You
Yeah.
might get
Even more of a red flag.
Don't worry, Velma doesn't know that either. If it's not flannel, she's not familiar.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? If we were just joking around and saying, well, obviously let's make her black, and obviously she's super empowered and she speaks in a snarky, kind of pert kind of way, and then obviously she's got to be in a lesbian romance with the girl, let's make her Asian, and then Shaggy, let's make him black. Like, everything we would do to be facetious is actually what's come up in reality, without irony.
Yeah. Well, they make it harder and harder to parody it. You're like, oh, we gotta go further. She'll be disabled and alien. Or something.
Yeah. It's like she'll be quadriplegic by the end of the first season, I guess. But like,
Do you think replacement Shaggy's gonna have like a black hood best friend that he calls dog named Scooby? Like is that how they're gonna play that? Like it's not gonna be an actual dog, it'll be like his metaphorical dog.
Well, I'm personally outraged that there's no Latino representation in the show. So they need to step back from the conversation and reflect on why they didn't. So,
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm furious that there's no like drunk Scottish representation.
Yeah, we're the Welsh people. We're the long people.
It's like if we can't see people who look, talk, and act exactly like us, then we can't identify with them. That's the rule nowadays. So yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, I can't identify with any of the characters they just presented to me. So I mean, I guess that's partly true, but it has nothing to do with their looks or ethnicities. It's all just the shit writing.
I mean, is this going to be pitched at like people of our age who remember the original Scooby-Doo? It's like, hey, it's a trip down memory lane, but everything's shit now. Like that's the selling point.
Like the like it looks pretty violent, right? Like that chick with no brain, like her head is laying open, dripping blood. Yeah. Daphne's naked in the background. I mean, she's got suds on her tits, but it's like, what age group is this? I was watching the trailer with my wife and her friend. We're sitting there and I'm looking at my stupid phone, but watching this thing. I'm like, oh, I have to watch this for the show I'm going on. And so we're like,
Drinker made me do it.
They're just asking. They're like, what is this for? Like, who is this? I don't know who it's for. Like, I can't figure that out. It's on HBO. I don't know what that even means anymore, but it's like not
my timeline of cause and effect, I think, is there's an army now of girls who were not the most pretty or beautiful in high school, quite intelligent. They weren't quite socially cool, and now they've grown up to become this mass army of screenwriters who are now creating these characters who are very evocative of that time, who are kind of snarky, clever, not the pretty one. And you see this character is sort of recurring. It's kind of a wine momish kind of thing now, blended with that. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, kind of self-deprecating, but also trying to be empowering at the same time, in a weird kind of muddle. And I don't know who it's pitched at. Is it supposed to be for like 15-year-old girls to feel like sassy and empowered when they watch it? Is that the deal?
I think Fire at Will's got it.
Yeah, it's like I think it's literally just for the people who wrote this. It's like they're projecting all their hang-ups onto it. I kid you not, man. It's the same fucking story as She-Hulk, where it's like I'm mid-30s, like I live alone with my cats. I'm depressed. Like all I have is my job. I've got nothing in my life that's got any kind of like long-term worth
Well, the
or
Office was probably
fulfillment.
peak, right? for her.
Yeah, and it's like, but I need to like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a character that's exactly like me, but have her be amazing, and so that's going to make me feel better about myself, and that's like pretty much the mindset behind
Oh wait, this is for Wine Moms. Oh shit, it'll fly well in my locals chat. Then. Perfect. That's great. It'll be perfect for my locals chat. We'll all watch it.
Yeah, like I do have to ask, like, was Mindy Kaling ever fucking funny? Because like she was annoying in The Office, and that wasn't written by her. And then I saw a little bit of the Mindy Project because I was kind of curious, and I was like, nope, that's awful. Like it's like about as funny as a cancer diagnosis. And now you've got this, and I'm like, how does she keep getting work? Like, who keeps hiring her, and why?
The funniest thing she ever
Everyone's
did.
just like, no, she doesn't. Nope, nope, nope.
The funniest thing in The Office with her was when they were playing that game where they had to wear like an ethnicity on their forehead on a post-it note,
amazing.
and the other people had to like act it out, and she got Indian, and Michael Scott was doing like the most offensively Indian impression ever, and she just slaps him. But it wasn't funny for her; it was funny because of him doing the impression. It was just fucking great.
Well, so I just checked. Apparently, she wrote 2 episodes of The Office. So they're both in season 1, which is the least popular season, right? Except for the last one.
Yeah, because that's when they hadn't quite figured out the characters, and Michael Scott was like a totally different person. Yeah, all that stuff.
Unless this is something else. Oh wait, The Office.
Most of The Office actors were the writing staff.
Oh, my bad. I was reading the wrong thing. She wrote 26 episodes of The Office, apparently.
What the fuck? Really?
And that
Probably
stretches from season 1 to 8. She had several.
A contributing writer or the sole writer on those credits?
Some of these come across as though she was a sole writer, potentially. I'd have to check in more in depth. But yeah, I'm not familiar with her work that much. Well, I watched all of The Office, but I don't know which ones were her or how much she is the reason for them being strong. But she's also got like 4 weddings and a funeral. I didn't see that. The Sex Lives of College Girls. Oh, God.
It sounds like it could be a good movie, but it's not.
You know that sort of stereotype that like female comedians can only ever do like about like a routine about sex and relationships. Well,
yeah. here's the issue. Fuck, where was I going with this? Damn it, I lost it. Never mind.
It's alright. That happens to me all the time.
It doesn't matter.
The only way I think where they could make it more for modern audiences than it already is if they had an ancillary character who is neurodivergent and is kind of judged for it, but actually turns out to be the one who solves the crime because they think in a different way that other people don't. It's the only further thing.
Well, they're missing a trans character.
That's true.
They'll have one. They'll have one, I'm sure. Oh, I thought of it though. Does it ever occur to these people that not every smart female character was actually a snarky, sarcastic asshole? Like
no, it doesn't.
If there's a like, and the one that did it right was Daria. Someone mentioned Daria back in the 90s or whatever. Daria was great, but like ever since Daria, it's like any smart female, particularly young character, has to be like sassy and sarcastic. It's like no, not all smart chicks were sassy and sarcastic. Some of them are just smart, and like not. They didn't have to be specially interesting. And Velma was not like as snarky. I mean, she would have occasional stuff, but she was just the smart nerdy chick, and that was fine.
Yeah, she would lose her glasses. That was one of the main things that happened. She would drop her glasses.
Yeah, but it's like they each had kind of a role, like or a niche within the group, and yeah, like her thing was like she kind of knew about scientific stuff, and like she was just like like you say, the nerdy one who could puzzle things out in a more intellectual way, but she wasn't perfect. And yeah, like I don't know why you would feel the need to make her the focal point of a narrative. Like she's not that interesting as a character, and it's kind of terrifying that if IGN gave this show 6 out of 10, it's literally a 2 out of 10 in real person terms because that's.
So the show is pitched as a love quadrangle. Shaggy has got a crush on Velma. Velma's got a crush on Daphne. Daphne has a complicated relationship, it says, with Velma, and Velma's got a crush on Fred. So it's a quadrangle.
You see what I mean?
And
about,
Fred
like,
has a crush on Shaggy.
Yeah.
No one's got a crush on.
But who's got a crush on Scooby? That's what I want to know.
That'd be Daphne.
Naughty Fairy does.
But it's like, why does any of this stuff have to come into it? Like, why do we care about like the sexuality and the like whatever each of these characters are attracted to? Like, why is that important to a show like this? It's just
they lost the idea that all of that was just. It was all subtext. Like everyone was kind of in on the jokes of it in the original. Like you knew Fred and Daphne were together. Like that was a thing in the original one.
Implied,
yeah, it's implied, and then you get the idea that Velma's like always kind of like interested in Fred a little bit, just because he's the handsome, charismatic leader type. Like he's the alpha in the room, even though he wore an ascot or whatever. But they didn't have to say anything about it. It wasn't the main focal point of the show. It didn't matter. It was just ancillary to everything. And that, again, like that can be fine. Like doesn't mean we all want a show about Velma's love interest. Actually, I don't know that anybody asked for this anywhere on Earth.
I tell you what, man. Like I don't know if you saw any of this stuff when they did this weird Masters of the Universe reboot. I personally, as a kid, never wanted to watch Skeletor fucking Evil Lyn, but I got to see that in this new show, and it's a thing I can never unsee, and it's horrifying. That's what I mean, though. That's where they take shows like this, like where it's things.
And I'm out.